Chapter 541. Fang Yuan looked at her in confusion. He saw a seemingly ethereal and light black figure in the wind and sand, but she was as still as a mountain in the strong wind and walked forward firmly and calmly. Didn't the senior say that this place is deserted? She can still see other people. Su Buwang clicked his tongue in wonder. Is it possible that she is also protected by the river magic weapon like the one you gave me, Uncle Fang? Fang Yuan frowned slightly. Ordinary practitioners couldn't stay in either the negative extreme area or the positive extreme area of the yin-yang region. Even he could only hold on for half a year at most. If it weren't for the Milky Way, he wouldn't dare to bring Su Buwang here. Seeing that the figure was not fast, Fang Yuan only hesitated for a moment and said, "Let's go and have a look." "Okay." Su Buwang smiled and stood up like a carp. He patted the sand on his body and said excitedly, "Maybe she is a fairy sister." Fang Yuan shook his head slightly. At this time, he was full of enthusiasm. Fang Yuan didn't know who he got such a slippery temperament from. After that, they sped up and chased after her. Sensing that two Numas were approaching quickly behind her, Su Li, who deliberately slowed down, calmed down her fluctuating eyes, but slightly pursed her lips with imperceptible bitterness. At this time and place, she met the two of them. She knew that it was not the right time and she should avoid them, but she couldn't control her feet after all. "Fellow Daoist, please wait." A familiar and somewhat cold voice came into her ears. Su Li took a deep breath and turned around. Her cold face suddenly became gentle and soft. Her long and narrow eyes narrowed, and her eyelashes trembled slightly. A chuckle came from under the black veil. "The wind and sand are all over the sky. Why do you stop me?" She was used to showing people with coldness, but she didn't know what kind of touching charm she pretended to be this time. For a moment, Fang Yuan and Su Buwang were both absent-minded. "She is really a fairy sister," Su Buwang muttered to himself. Su Li was reincarnated, so there was no blood connection. He didn't realize that the woman in front of him was the mother he had been looking for, and he didn't recognize that she was the female senior who gave him benefits for no reason in Han sect. With only the all-spirits method, as long as Su Li wanted, no one would know her real identity. Fang Yuan was absent-minded, but he was disappointed, not because of the beauty under the black veil. He once had some expectations in his heart. She had something to do with the yin-yang region. Maybe. But this woman's temperament was not similar to her at all, which made his hope disappear instantly. Thinking of this, Fang Yuan retracted his gaze, held his fist and said calmly, "Sorry to bother you. I just saw you walking alone here, so I am a little curious." Su Li chuckled and said, "Indeed, the yin-yang region is not a safe place. I am also worried. If you don't mind, how about going with me?" Fang Yuan immediately frowned and was about to refuse, but Su Buwang jumped out and said, "Of course. It's inconvenient for elder sister to be outside alone, so it's better to have two people to take care of me." Su Li didn't know whether to laugh or cry when she heard what Su Buwang called her, but she covered her mouth and smiled on the surface. "Thank you, little brother." Su Buwang blushed and scratched his head. Fang Yuan turned his head helplessly. Since Su Buwang agreed and the other party also thanked him, he couldn't say anything more. In this way, the three of them set off together. After walking for half a day, Fang Yuan looked up at the scorching sun that seemed to never set. When he just took out the map to compare, he found that his hand was empty, and the map had been taken by Su Li. His eyes were cold, and he was about to say something, but another more delicate map fell into his hand. The map fell into his hand. "How about using this map, child?" A delicate voice came. Fang Yuan looked down and glanced at it. His expression was slightly relaxed. "Your map is indeed more accurate. But next time, please tell me in advance, so as not to cause misunderstanding." Su Li raised her eyebrows. After so many years, Fang Yuan was still a blockhead. Seeing that the atmosphere was not very good, Su Buwang quickly stood up to smooth things over. "Sister, don't lower yourself to Uncle Fang's level. He is a blockhead, and he doesn't know how to cherish women. If he offends you, please forgive him." "Ha ha. Su Buwang." Fang Yuan looked a little annoyed. "It seems that I have been too indulgent to you recently. I have to change my practice plan." Su Buwang looked frightened. And Su Li immediately chuckled. Fang Yuan realized that there were outsiders on the scene, and it was not appropriate to teach Su Buwang a lesson. While feeling slightly sorry in his heart, he couldn't help but ask, "Miss, what are you laughing at?" "Nothing." Su Li flipped the hair on her forehead, turned her head, and revealed the black and purple lotus mark at the corner of her eyebrows. She whispered, "I just think that the relationship between you and your uncle and nephew is really good." Fang Yuan was stunned and did not answer. Just at that moment, he noticed a trace of sincere envy from that sentence. Maybe the woman in front of him was not as unrestrained as she looked. "Let's go. We can enter the Yin-Yang region in a day and a half," Fang Yuan said. Although his words were still emotionless, his tone was much more relaxed, which surprised Su Buwang greatly. "What happened just now?" Su Li squinted and smiled, and then she followed him. Although he was still a blockhead, his mind was still as meticulous as before. 24 hours. Su Buwang lay and counted the time with his fingers. He licked his dry lips and said weakly, but his voice was hoarse, "Uncle, why haven't we arrived yet? I'm dying." No matter how powerful Tianhe was, Su Buwang's cultivation was too low, and he couldn't protect it for a long time. Fang Yuan was anxious. He clenched the map in his hand and frowned. "The map mark is clearly here. Why is there no entrance?" Su Li walked gently to Su Buwang and suddenly held his hand. Su Buwang was shocked and wanted to withdraw his hand. Although he was optimistic, he didn't relax his vigilance at all. But with Su Li's cultivation, he couldn't escape if she wanted to catch him. The next moment, a cold pneuma flowed into the tendons and meridians along his wrist, and instantly smoothed out the burning pain and heat in his body. His dry lips also quickly became moist. "Hey!" Su Buwang stopped withdrawing his hand and sat up energetically. "Sister, what did you inject into my body? I feel much more comfortable. I was wondering how you could resist the extreme yang fire poison with ordinary cultivation. It turns out that there is a treasure in your body." As Su Li said, she looked at Fang Yuan, whose face became unkind again, and her tone became more unkind. "Although your treasure is a protective treasure, the effect of low-grade extreme yang fire poison is very limited. This guy is also a taciturn person. The fire poison in his body is stagnant and has burned his internal organs, but he doesn't say a word. If I find it a little later, it will affect his foundation." Fang Yuan's face changed slightly when he heard the words. He didn't have time to study the map anymore. He walked to Su Buwang in a few steps and grabbed his other hand. After a while, he suddenly showed shame and self-blame. "I was careless." He stared at Su Buwang's face. "Silly boy, why didn't you say it was painful?" Su Buwang smiled awkwardly. "I didn't know the consequences were so serious." "I didn't know the consequences would be so serious. Besides, it's not that painful. Compared with those years in Shengtian Shrine, this pain was really nothing." Fang Yuan's eyes darkened. Although he understood Su Buwang's meaning, he didn't know how to answer and could only be silent. After a while, he raised his head and looked at Su Li with apologetic eyes. "I'm sorry. This time, I wronged you again." Su Li rolled her eyes. "Child, you wronged me many times along the way, right? You men are still too careless in taking care of children. You brought him to the Yin-Yang region at such a young age. You are really careless." "I'm not young." Su Buwang sat in the middle and protested. "I'm more than 1,000 years old. Sister, you look younger than me." "I like this sentence." Su Li smiled sweetly and slightly raised her lips. "Remember to say more nice words in the future. I have some good things here that I am reluctant to use. Maybe if you make me happy, I will give them all to you." Su Buwang's face turned red again. He was really not good at dealing with female practitioners, especially the one in front of him was very beautiful. "Since Brother Buwang is fine for the time being, don't worry too much." After confirming Su Buwang's situation again, Su Li said to Fang Yuan, "In my opinion, extreme yin generates yang, and extreme yang generates yin. Maybe it is related to the alternation of sun and moon and the time. We might as well wait for another 24 hours. Maybe it won't be so long before we see the change." Fang Yuan nodded. "That's the only way." The atmosphere was silent for a while, but Fang Yuan was thinking about the healing method used by the masked woman just now. The treasure of Tianhe was indeed not good at defending against the fire poison of extreme yang, but it was also a protective treasure. It was definitely not as weak as the woman said. The woman did not show her cultivation along the way, but her healing method alone showed that she was by no means an ordinary person. Is there such a person in the holy sect of Qingshui Circle? Did the Grand Elder of Tsiyun House make a new breakthrough after I left the sect? The breath of the woman in front of me is young. She is definitely not an old person. It's weird. After thinking about it, Fang Yuan hesitated for a long time and finally couldn't help asking. Girl, I have a question to ask, but I don't know if I should ask. Since you know it's presumptuous, why do you still ask? Fang Yuan blinked and was a little confused. Su Buwang had a hard time holding back his laughter. Uncle Fang was such a proud person, but there were times when he was defeated. Haha. Fortunately, he remembered that his practice plan was still controlled by Fang Yuan in time, so he didn't laugh out loud. Time passed by the 10th hour in a strange silence. Heh! Su Li suddenly narrowed her eyes. She stood up and looked at the side with his back to the sun. Sister, what's wrong? Su Buwang was confused and followed her to look, but there was nothing there. After 3 breaths, Fang Yuan finally looked slightly serious. He stood beside Su Li and said in a deep voice, Girl, your 5 senses are so sharp. Your cultivation should be above mine. Su Li's eyes flashed. Child, you flatter me. Come here. Fang Yuan's eyes were stern. Please take care of Buwang, girl. Then, before Su Li said anything, he rushed out with the white light of the flying sword in an instant. Su Li helplessly protected Su Buwang, who was still confused. I have said that my cultivation is above yours. You men really like to show off. The next moment, a huge and ferocious shadow rose from the ground in front of him. Su Buwang opened his eyes in horror. He finally understood what they meant. What the hell was that? Chapter 542. I smell the smell of a living person. The black shadow finally stretched out its body completely. It was a huge black tree with a height of dozens of meters, which shrouded Su Li and Su Buwang in a shadow. Suddenly, a bright sword light lit up out of thin air and penetrated the back of the black tree. Fang Yuan, who was hiding behind the black tree, changed his face slightly. He clearly stabbed it, but why did it feel like he stabbed in the air? Ha ha ha, there are still little bugs who dare to attack me. Hundreds of distorted human faces suddenly appeared on the giant tree, and thousands of black eyes opened at the same time. Su Buwang was so disgusted that he almost vomited. Sister, what is this? It's so ugly. As soon as the words came out, the human faces who were still looking for Fang Yuan stopped, and immediately all their eyes fell on Su Buwang. Hey! Su Buwang was stunned. He didn't know why his mind suddenly went blank, and he couldn't move. Idiot, run away. Fang Yuan's sound transmission exploded crazily in his ears, but his body felt tight under his feet because of the flaw in the sound transmission this time. He had been entangled by a black vine. The next moment, the vine swung fiercely. Boom. Fang Yuan smashed into the desert like a meteor. Uncle Fang. Su Buwang, who came back to his sense, saw this scene, and his face suddenly changed wildly. Before he rushed out, he felt that his body was light, and he was already in the air. Boom. The vines where he originally stood dispersed, and there was a huge pit. Su Buwang suddenly broke into a cold sweat. Little bug, how dare you say that I'm ugly? The ghost's unique voice came from hundreds of mouths, and countless black vines shot at him. Even if the cold breath hadn't touched him, he couldn't help but tremble. Uncle Fang, Su Buwang's strength was still too weak. In front of such a monster, he could only wait for death helplessly. Seeing that he couldn't avoid it, he was still worried about the safety of Fang Yuan. Suddenly, he vaguely heard a cold snort. The dense black vines instantly stopped at the same time, and the face tree's sight fell on Su Li, who had no sense of existence all the time. However, with just one look, he was instantly horrified. How could it be? Lord Hong Baizhu is still alive. Rumble, the gigantic human face tree suddenly began to dig madly into the ground. At this moment, he was even vaguely regretting his arrogance in revealing his true form. It was too troublesome to escape now. Su Li watched the human-faced tree escape with calm eyes. The bloody tears in her eyes disappeared. Master, I want to eat. Su Li narrowed her eyes slightly. I'll give you 3 breaths. You scared my son Su Buwang. He shouldn't be alive, do you know? I understand. Sensing the evil spirit in Su Li's words, the little girl retreated with trepidation. After 3 breaths, the pneuma of the face tree that had escaped into the ground disappeared as expected. The little girl didn't run around and returned to Kang Lei's cave. The aura has become even more annoying. On the other side of Kang Lei's cave, Su Bai touched his hungry and shriveled stomach and sighed. Sister, I want to eat delicious food, too. Escaped. Su Buwang blinked. Although he didn't understand what happened, it was not difficult to guess that the escape of the face tree must have something to do with this sister who had never been willing to reveal her name. By the way, Uncle Fang. With no time to think, Su Buwang immediately rushed to the place where Fang Yuan was smashed and pushed away the hot sand with both hands. Su Li came close and made a gesture. Suddenly, a large piece of sand rolled aside. The sand rolled aside, revealing Fang Yuan in it. Su Buwang quickly picked up Fang Yuan with difficulty, and his face turned red. Damn it, Uncle Fang is very thin. Why is he so heavy? It's because your physical body is too weak. Brother Su, let me do it. Su Buwang felt his hands were light. When he saw the weak woman on the opposite side picked up the unconscious Fang Yuan with one hand, he couldn't help but be a little confused. For the first time, he doubted whether the practice plan Uncle Fang made for him was too little. Su Li gently put Fang Yuan on the ground. After a little examination, her tightly knitted eyebrows suddenly relaxed. It's not a big problem. He was poisoned with a little ghost poison. With the self-healing ability of his physical body, he will wake up soon. If he hadn't been worried about you, he wouldn't have exposed his flaws. Hearing what she said, Su Buwang breathed a sigh of relief, but he couldn't help blaming himself. He whispered bitterly, Uncle Fang gave me the treasure for protection. I'm really useless. Su Li chuckled and couldn't help touching Su Buwang's hair. She said softly, you are still young. I can't blame you for this. Since you understand the importance of strength, you should work hard to practice. Don't let Uncle Fang down. Do you understand? Su Buwang froze in place and obediently let Su Li touch his hair. He didn't dare to move. This feeling, he had never felt it. If mother was by my side, would she also often touch my hair, whisper to me, show concern for my well-being, and give me advice? Thinking about it, Su Buwang felt that his eyes were a little wet. Suddenly, he was embarrassed and lowered his head. It's good to see you grow up healthily. Su Li thought secretly. She smiled and withdrew her hand. I cast a lightning spell on your Uncle Fang. Carry him on your back. It's time for us to enter the Yin-Yang region. Su Buwang wiped his eyes without a trace. He looked up at the direction pointed by Su Li and couldn't help but be surprised. There was a twisted crack there. With his eyesight, he could vaguely see the appearance of the city inside. When did it appear? Su Buwang thought a little confusedly. He carried Fang Yuan on his back and followed Su Li into the crack. After a short period of darkness, Fang Yuan frowned and moved his eyebrows. He suddenly opened his eyes and straightened up like a corpse coming back to life. Su Buwang, who was watching on the side, jumped up in fright. Although his expression was exaggerated, he was much calmer. Uncle Fang, you finally wake up. The sister is right. It's only been 4 hours. Fang Yuan looked at Su Buwang carefully. Seeing that he had no injury, he was relieved. Then he had time to look around. It was a well-decorated room. Where is this place? Of course, it's the Yin-Yang region. Su Buwang sat down again. Uncle Fang, after you were sent flying by the ugly monster, the elder sister and the ugly monster fought so fiercely that the sky fell and the earth cracked, and the sun and moon lost their light. Speak human language. Fang Yuan was so angry that he laughed. This guy almost died, but he still had time to joke here. Just by looking at his expression, he knew that this guy was talking nonsense again. Su Buwang smiled embarrassedly and said, sure enough, nothing can escape your eyes. He scratched his head. I don't know the specific process. I just heard a cold hum, and then the ugly monster dug the ground and ran away crazily. I really don't understand. Uncle, do you have any idea? Ran away? Fang Yuan's eyes were slightly cold, and he was more afraid of the woman in black in his heart. He was born in a noble family and had a wide range of knowledge. Although he didn't know it this time, he also understood what he had encountered. And that woman could actually scare away a ghost with a cold hum? No matter how he thought about it, there was something very unusual in it. Thinking of this, Fang Yuan glanced at the room. But he didn't see anyone else. The sister went to inquire about the news. Her purpose is actually the same as ours. She came to the Linli building, Su Buwang said thoughtlessly. Fang Yuan was shocked, and the flame buried in the bottom of his heart couldn't help burning again. After thinking for a moment, Fang Yuan was about to get out of bed. At this moment, the door was suddenly pushed open. I advise you to lie down for a while. Although the human face tree is not a very powerful ghost, it will be trouble if you encounter the ghost poison. It's always right to be careful. Su Li changed into a more spacious black robe, which covered her graceful body. She no longer looked outstanding. Fang Yuan's eyes darkened, and he cupped his fists. Just now, thank you. You don't need to thank me. Su Li sat down at the table and poured a pot of tea for herself. We agreed when we traveled together that we could take care of each other. Now I just did what I should do. Fang Yuan withdrew his observation with some disappointment. In the reincarnation mirror, he stayed with Su Li all the time, so he knew all Su Li's little habits and preferences very well. Pouring tea with her right hand. She always used to use her left hand. Since we have arrived in the Yin-Yang region, I will come straight to the point. Su Li took a sip of tea and looked up. What I came here for is simple. I heard that the base camp of the Linli building is in the Yin-Yang region. I am really curious about the owner of the Linli building who dares to do such a risky thing under the nose of so many holy sects. There is only one owner of the Linli building. Fang Yuan stared at Su Li. Since you are so interested in it, it is impossible that you don't know the identity of the owner. Su Li covered her mouth and chuckled. She said carelessly, yes, I know. But that person is dead, isn't he? So, he must be the new owner. Fang Yuan's eyes became serious, but Su Li refuted. Why? Do you still think that person is still alive? Do you think it is possible that he is targeted by so many holy sects? Fang Yuan was silent. Even though he knew that what the woman said in front of him was true, he still didn't want to believe it. If he believed it, everything he did would be meaningless. I say, Uncle Fang, sister, who are you talking about? Su Buwang, who was eating melon seeds aside, finally interjected and asked. He didn't think about his mother at all. In his consciousness, the image of his mother was still the maid that Ling Li said. Even if she had a relationship with Uncle Fang, it didn't mean anything. It just meant that his mother must be very beautiful. Otherwise, even the Emperor of Evil would be tempted and give birth to him with his mother. Of course, it is the owner of the Linli building. Su Li took a deep look at Su Buwang, and then turned to look at Fang Yuan, who was a little impatient, and said, Little brother, your understanding of the Qingshui circle is too low. If you have time, ask your Uncle Fang more. There are only advantages and no disadvantages. Do you know? Oh, being taught a lesson again, Su Buwang didn't feel disgusted at all. He scratched his head and thought of the thing that his head was touched before. Fang Yuan faintly breathed a sigh of relief. After a moment of silence, he said, Buwang and I come here to find someone. If we find her, we will leave. What should the girl do? Chapter 543. Of course, I want to join them. Su Li turned the teacup in her hand and said leisurely, I have nothing to do recently. It's rare for something to arouse my interest. Besides, if I don't join them, how can I meet the current owner of the Linli building? Fang Yuan habitually frowned slightly. This woman was too thoughtful and her words were mixed. It was hard to understand her. However, his intuition told him that it might not be a bad thing for this woman to join the Linli building. So, we have the same purpose for the time being. Before we find the Linli building, what do you think? Fang Yuan looked up at the woman in front of him. His eyes were naturally a little cold, which was not as clear as before. Su Li's eyes were full of gentleness. She gently put down the teacup and said with a smile, "That's right." As she said, she waved her hand casually. A black vortex appeared out of thin air, and then a handsome young man in yellow clothes came out. As soon as he came out, he trembled and knelt at the table. He said in a panic, "Forgive me, I will tell you everything." Su Li ignored him and said to Fang Yuan with a smile, "I just went out and found that the city was really chaotic. There were even people who stole things. So, I simply caught them and asked them." The young man in yellow stared at him. "When did he steal things?" "He just got the order to monitor the foreign practitioners in the Yin-Yang region. But before he entered the inn, he blacked out and didn't know anything." "I see." After experiencing the Zhenyang desert, Fang Yuan's vigilance was reduced a lot. He didn't doubt Su Li's words. He immediately nodded and said, "Since you caught them, you can interrogate them. I will wait and see." "Okay." Su Li leaned on the table and raised her eyebrows slightly. "Young man, what's your name?" The young man in yellow clothes was stunned. He looked away evasively and stammered, My surname is Li, young man." Su Li interrupted the young man in yellow clothes with a smile and said lightly, "I will give you another chance. If you lie again, don't blame me for being cruel. You should know that the soul-searching skill is the most abundant in the cultivation circle. It's not easy for me to be kind, but you are not willing to cooperate. You are really." "I am Guofeng Yu." The young man in yellow immediately knelt straight and shouted loudly. Su Buwang almost laughed out loud. In this day and age, there weren't many people who could be so righteous and honest. "Nice name." Su Li praised. "Little Guo, do you know the division of forces in the cultivation cities in the Yin-Yang region? If your answer satisfies this servant, I will let you go, and I will naturally not use any tricks." Hearing this, Guo Fengyou's eyes immediately lit up. "Of course I know. I was born in the Yin-Yang domain, and I've been making a living in Ju City since I was a child. There's no cultivation sect in this city that I don't know." "Very good, looks like I've asked the right person." Su Li chuckled. "Well, tell me about it." Guo Fengyu was stunned for a moment. He had a lot of information about the various forces in his mind, and he wanted to use the questions he was asked to find out the details of these people. However, the young girl in front of him seemed to be about the same age as him, and her mind was very cunning. She actually let him do as he wished. It's not very good. At such a critical moment, a powerful figure came. It must be for that. Guo Fengyu was very confused. Seeing that Su Li's eyes became more and more unkind, he finally couldn't bear it. He frowned and said, "Ju City is very big. Most of the people are desperados. It's very chaotic, but there is order in the chaos. Most practitioners are incorporated by the three forces in Ju City. I heard from my father that the three forces were the Baichuan Mansion, the Morning Soul House, and the Laiyang Villa about 800 years ago. Later, I don't know what happened. The Baichuan Mansion was suddenly incorporated by another completely strange force. That force is now the head of the three forces, the Linli Building." Hearing these three words from a stranger, both Su Li and Fang Yuan's eyes flashed, and they felt relieved at the same time. The information was true. The branch of Ju City is extremely long and narrow, stretching for hundreds of kilometers. The Linli Building occupied 60% of it in just 800 years, and the remaining 40% was divided by the Morning Soul House and the Laiyang Villa. As for other small sects, there are new ones almost every day. The old ones are destroyed, and I don't want to remember them. 800 years ago, Fang Yuan frowned and recalled. At that time, Qingshui Circle was in chaos because of the breaking of the reincarnation mirror. The matter that he and Ling Li trapped and killed 100,000 talents was also known by the senior officials of the sect. Therefore, he was grounded, and it was impossible to judge who could come here to establish a force at that time. It turns out that the Linli Building has been established for 800 years. Su Li thought, "Who on earth will persevere to fight against the holy sects for me?" She glanced at Fang Yuan secretly. According to Fang Yuan's temperament, it was indeed possible. But, Since Fang Yuan appeared here, it must not be there. Then, coldness flashed in Su Li's eyes, which made Guofengyo's heart beat fast. He couldn't even take care of his son well. He let him wander about and suffer all kinds of grievances. The evil emperor was really powerful. Senior, can this lowly one leave now? Guofengyo's careful voice brought Su Li back to reality. We were just talking and you want to leave already? Su Li squinted and smiled. Since you know everything, you should know where the three forces are, right? Well, Guofengyu said with some embarrassment, the other two forces are not difficult, but the Linli building. This force has always been very mysterious. Not to mention the gate, even the members of this force can't be seen. Every time they take action, they cover their faces with spells and wear the same clothes. They stroll in the city on weekdays. Even the people selling sesame seed cakes on the roadside may be from the Linli building. How can I know? The more Su Li listened, the colder her eyes were. Fang Yuan also frowned. He thought of a possibility that should not exist at all. Such a heartless person clearly drew a line with the reincarnation mirror as soon as he got the memory. But this force was similar to the Enmore cult in the reincarnation mirror. If it was really as he thought, it was meaningless to come here this time. Instead, it would expose his whereabouts to the Shengtian shrine. It's really troublesome. Su Li said softly and pointed at Guofengyu. The storage bag on Guofengyo's waist automatically fell off. Guofengyu was stunned and then turned pale with fright. He immediately stood up and wanted to grab it back. But he was no match for Su Li. His hands grasped nothing. You young man, your cultivation is not high and your mind is very simple. But you can live safe and sound until now. Su Li squinted and smiled. It seemed that the soul mark on the storage bag did not exist. She opened it slowly and said, "Let me see which force you come from." It's over. Guofengyo's eyes were blank and he collapsed on the ground. Ding! Clang! 2 jade tokens fell on the table. One was green and the other was white. The 2 words Linli on the back were clearly visible. Su Li raised her eyebrows and said in a teasing tone, "Young man, it turns out that you are from the Linli building, the first force in Ju Cheng." "I'm sorry." "Oh." With a smile in her eyes, Su Li pretended to be flustered and said, "Then, I offended the Linli building. Should I kill them?" "No." Guofengyu squatted and covered his head. He shouted in fear, "Don't kill me. I finally became an official disciple of the Linli building yesterday. My life is just." "Ah." Su Buwang approached him and reluctantly withdrew his hand from Guofengyo's shoulder. Looking at Guofengyu, who was scared and twitching, he said helplessly, "Stop shaking. Don't you see that I am teasing you? You are such a good person. How can you kill innocent people?" "I am not a good person." Su Li refuted. She turned to look at Fang Yuan, who was thinking, and said with a smile, "Fellow practitioner Fang, are you interested in playing a play with me?" "Huh." Fang Yuan was excited. A moment later, "Brother Su, how about my dress?" Su Li adjusted her hair and looked at Su Buwang with gentleness that the latter could not perceive in her eyes. Well, Su Buwang looked at the girl who changed into an emerald dress in front of him. On the top of the cyan translucent curtain, a pair of pure black eyes were as clear as water without any impurities. After her slightly messy hair, her waterfall-like black hair danced freely. She was really a budding girl who was pure and beautiful. She looked much more immature than him. Su Buwang couldn't help but twitch his mouth. "Sister, you are more beautiful than Uncle Fang." He couldn't help but continue. The beautiful sister who suddenly appeared not only had a higher cultivation than Uncle Fang, but also had a way to keep her appearance. Compared with Uncle Fang, who had been through many vicissitudes of life, she was much less sad and angry. Comparing oneself with others, Su Buwang sighed. Fang Yuan's eyelids twitched and he said calmly, "Shall we go or not?" Su Buwang shivered and said hurriedly, "Let's go. You always walk in front. Now you are the one with the highest cultivation in the whole team. You can take 2 siblings with weak cultivation to cross the Jianyang desert." Su Li covered her mouth and chuckled, "Forget it. Fellow practitioner Fang, don't care about your nephew. You have to perform well. If you expose yourself, All our requests will be ruined. Of course I can tell. Fang Yuan nodded expressionlessly, but he was a little unwilling in his heart. However, his image was really not suitable for him to pretend to be young and seek refuge in the Linli building. Fortunately, there was Bu Wang. Thinking of this, Fang Yuan was silent for a moment and couldn't help but transmit the sound in silence. Miss, please take care of Bu Wang's safety. Su Li's eyes were shining, and she chuckled, I will. Su Buwang looked at the two of them and scratched his head. What are you talking about? Guo Fengyu stood in front of the inn and listened to the three people talking and laughing. She thought desperately in her heart. I have just become an official disciple. Am I going to betray the sect now? Here it is. Guo Fengyu opened the door cleverly and warmly invited Fang Yuan and the other two people to walk into the courtyard. She said incessantly, Senior, the Linli building is definitely the best place for you to take care of your orphan. I know that if the Linli building hadn't adopted me as an off-staff disciple in the early years, I would have starved to death on the street. How could I live to this day? Fang Yuan nodded gently and looked back to see two faces full of panic. His eyelids kept twitching. Chapter 544. 34 Chinese Network. In 1 second wonderful pop-up window free reading. Why are you so noisy? An old farmer carrying a hoe came out of the seemingly ordinary farmyard. Seeing the young man in yellow, the old man's angry face eased a little. It turns out to be Guo Fengyu. Today you, in the middle of the words, the old man finally noticed Fang Yuan, who was extraordinary behind Guo Fengyu. The old man's original casual expression was immediately restrained, and his eyes were full of vigilance. You are very unfamiliar. Guo Fengyu smiled embarrassedly. Old Cai, didn't you ask me to monitor the outsider? Yes. The old man responded, put down the hoe, and put it on the side of the door. He made a gesture and said solemnly, Your Excellency, do you want to talk in the house? Of course. Fang Yuan nodded, and then turned around and said, You two wait outside the house. Don't run around. Yes, Uncle Fang. Su Li and Su Buwang said yes. Fang Yuan's eyes flashed a touch of helplessness. He turned around and walked into the house with the farmer. Seeing this, Guo Fengyu couldn't help but worry. He was about to secretly transmit the sound to the farmer, but Su Li's leisurely voice came into his ears first. Young man, we mean no harm. But if we have to kill him because of what you said, it will not be good. Guo Fengyu held her breath, and the sound was stuck in her throat. Although old Cai had joined the Linli building for many years, he usually made a living by planting spiritual rice. His cultivation was probably not high. Thanks to his care over these years, Guo Fengyu couldn't hurt him. It's really terrible. Guo Fengyu sighed in her heart. Old Cai was more important. The furnishings in the house were very old, just like an ordinary old farmer's house. But the moment Fang Yuan walked in, he noticed that it was not simple. In such a chaotic city, it was common for houses to be rebuilt. But the furnishings in the house had not been changed for at least hundreds of years. Impregnable. This word flashed in Fang Yuan's mind, and his eyes were full of light. No wonder Guo Fengyu was a little naive. It turned out that there was a senior guarding him. While thinking, the two had taken their seats respectively. Old Cai poured a cup of tea for Fang Yuan and coughed twice. You are a guest from afar, so I treat you with courtesy. But, it is not honorable to threaten a half-grown child. Senior, you're wrong. Fang Yuan shook his head and said, Unusual times call for unusual things. I have no choice. Please forgive me. Old man Cai took a sip of tea and pondered for a moment before continuing, Forget it. That child is too naive and this old man is also at fault. Why have you come to the Yin-Yang region? I came to entrust an orphan to you. Fang Yuan said in a low voice, I offended a force. It's not convenient to take them with me. I only beg you to take them in. If you want any reward, just mention it. I will never refuse. Fellow Daoist, your surname is Fang? The old man surnamed Cai thought for a while on his wrinkled face, but he didn't ask his name. He just said, My surname is Cai, and my first name is Ji. I can accept the two children on behalf of the Linli building. People in the Yin-Yang region never ask about their origins. You can rest assured. Hearing the elder's words, Fang Yuan was surprised and hesitated. Everything came too easily, so he was a little worried. The old man chuckled. You must be curious. Yes. I heard from friend Guo that the Linli building is very mysterious, but now it is so easy to accept outsiders. It's completely different from my imagination. Fang Yuan told the truth, and the old man was a little relieved. He shook his head and said, I believe in my own vision. Although my status in the Linli building is not high, it is not a problem to arrange two people. What's more, it's a special period now. We need manpower. Fang Yuan raised his eyebrows and said, special period? Yes. Old man Cai smiled and showed his yellow teeth. He suddenly looked a little treacherous. It's not a secret in the big forces in the Yin-Yang region. You can go with me 2 days later. Those boys and girls can also go there to see the world. Then you will know why I am so easy to talk to. Fang Yuan frowned, but he still nodded. So, I will wait for a few days. Fengyu, come here. Freshly baked spiritual potatoes. On the ridge of the spiritual field, Su Buwang excitedly ran to Guo Fengyu with hot spiritual potatoes in his hands. Guo Fengyu rolled her eyes and snorted, You steal the spiritual potatoes from old Cai again. Be careful that he will hit you with a hoe. I am not afraid. Uncle Fang is here. Besides, there is my sister. Guo Fengyu glanced at Su Li, who had peeled a spiritual potato, and immediately smiled. As the saying goes, the law does not punish the masses. No matter how powerful old Cai was, he couldn't beat them together. I haven't even settled the matter of you threatening me last time. You want to bribe me? No way. Guo Fengyu had a look of disdain on her face, but her hands disobediently took the spirit potato and began to eat it while giggling. The grudges from a few days ago had long been tossed beyond the highest heavens. Ho ho, unexpectedly, the two boys get along well. Seeing the scene from a distance, old Cai smiled with some relief. I only care about protecting him, but I forget that he even has no friends of the same age. Now he has 2 more friends, which can make up for my mistake. Fang Yuan could only nod silently after hearing that. Old Cai thought that he was worried about the enemy, so he just sighed and said nothing. What? You have no parents since you were a child? Su Buwang spat out the skin of the spiritual potato in his mouth and smirked. Although I have a father, it's better than not having one. I was brought up by an old servant who sweeps the floor. Later, the old servant died. I was lonely and was despised by those people all day long. Compared to me, you still have old man Cai. Guo Fengyu stared at him and said, You are so miserable. Although old Cai looks fierce on the surface, I have nothing to say about him, isn't that right? Su Buwang said with some disappointment. He didn't notice that the spiritual potato in Su Li's hand had become a pile of black powder. What about your Uncle Fang? Who is he? Guo Fengyu asked curiously. I think he is very good to you. He? I don't know. Su Buwang scratched his head. I met him suddenly. Maybe we hit it off. I followed him everywhere and felt much better than staying at home. Well, I still don't know your name. How old are you this year? Me, Su Buwang, 1019 years old this year. You are 1000 years old? I am only 700 years old. Nice to meet you. Ha ha ha, what are you doing? Well, I will accept you as my younger brother. The 2 young men played on the ridge of the field, without any self-awareness as practitioners. Old Cai couldn't help laughing. Younger brother, you said that I overprotected Fengyu. I think you are almost the same. Fang Yuan's face darkened. Did this guy forget the purpose of coming here? Suddenly, he fixed his eyes and saw the black powder falling around Su Li. He was slightly confused. What was she doing? Well, younger brother, it's almost time. Go back and have a rest. It's time for us to set off. Old Cai stood up and patted the dust on his body. Then he turned around and walked back. After a while, they changed into the unique uniforms of the Linli building. Each of them had a bamboo hat in their hands. Fang Yuan touched the familiar pattern on the bamboo hat. His eyes were slightly bright. It was exactly the same as the reincarnation mirror. The manager of the Leanly building was definitely an acquaintance. The bamboo hat is attached with a tactical matrix. After you put it on, you can cover your face. It was the first time for Guofengyu to participate in such an action. She was excited. After hearing that, she became more excited. Old CAI, this is the unique fog-concealing bamboo hat of the Leanly building. You have so many. Don't talk nonsense. Put it on quickly. Old CAI became fierce again. Guofengyu shrank her neck and quickly put on the bamboo hat. Her face was suddenly covered by a layer of fog. They left the house and walked a few steps along the street. Suddenly, she seemed to feel something. But she didn't look back. She just transmitted the sound to Fang Yuan. Fang Yuan stopped and looked back. Suddenly, his pupils shrank. The original yard was gone. Ho ho, it seems that you also know about the tactical matrix. It may be a surprise to take you there this time. Old CAI laughed. Fang Yuan shook his head and said, I don't even know what the purpose of the action is. I can't guarantee it. You will know when you go there. Fang Yuan nodded and followed her. The three people behind him walked side by side. Su Li walked on the far left and looked up at the gloomy sky from time to time. Why are there no people on the streets of Jucheng? Su Buwang felt strange. Guofengyu shook her head, it's not like this usually. I have never seen it. After walking a few more streets, Su Li looked up more often. What are you looking at, sister? Su Buwang felt a little strange. But he sensed that the mood of the two people in front of him became serious, so he couldn't ask more. Here we are. All of a sudden, old CAI stopped in the middle of the continent. Guofengyu and Su Buwang were stunned. What? Before they asked, the scene in front of them suddenly changed. It turned into a dark red as if the world had changed. All the houses around disappeared, as if they had entered another world. Lord Shenong, you are finally here. A black cloud surged in the distance. When they approached, Su Buwang found that it was a group of people who also wore the costumes of the Leanly building. The leading man's voice was a little strange, but it didn't prevent them from hearing it clearly. Lord Shuo and others are all here. Old CAI looked slightly serious under the bamboo hat. It seems that the situation is not good. Let's go there quickly. Okay. After that, the leading man turned around and left without doubting the people behind old CAI. Guofengyu curled her lips. The old man's position in the Leanly building is not bad. Old bastard, you have kept it from me for so long. No wonder there are so many misty cloaks. They moved forward. It seemed that there was no direction in this world. The direction was only marked by color. The deeper they went, the closer the color of the ground was to black, and it was sticky like blood that hadn't dried up. This damn place is really uncomfortable. Uncomfortable? Su Buwang was a little confused after hearing Guofengyu's words. Why do I feel quite comfortable? Chapter 545. Comfortable? Guofengyu glanced at Su Buwang strangely, and the latter immediately smiled awkwardly. Just kidding. When Guofengyu turned around, Su Buwang's face slightly darkened. He was not kidding. Even he knew that it was absolutely not a normal phenomenon to feel comfortable in such a strange area. Su Li's white palm brushed the air, and she raised her eyebrows slightly. It was somewhat familiar. The pneuma of the bloodstone. Since we are here, I will not hide it from you. Old CAI, who was not far in front, secretly transmitted the sound to everyone. Since 1,000 years ago, the yin-yang region has been shrinking, and the reason is this place. We call this place the Bloody Circle. There are two extremes of yin and yang in the yin-yang region. Yin and yang contradict each other and maintain a balance. However, 1,000 years ago, the Bloody Circle appeared between the two without warning and broke the absolute balance, causing the yin-yang region to be squeezed and constantly shattered. There are also tactical matrix masters in the yin-yang region. They speculate that if the development of the Bloody Circle is not curbed, the yin-yang region will disappear completely in another 100 years, whether it was the former Baichuan mansion or the current Leanly building. As the pillar of the yin-yang region, they naturally have to shoulder the responsibility of destroying the Bloody Circle. Speaking of this, old Cai laughed. Of course, the overall situation will be taken care of by Lord Shuo. What we can do is to try our best to clear the endless blood tide in the bloody circle. I see. Fang Yuan nodded, but he only believed 70% in his heart. The man was so respectful to old Cai just now. Old Cai's status was definitely not as low as he described. It was even likely that she was one of the higher-ups of the Linli building. But why didn't he admit it? He glanced at Guo Fengyu and didn't say anything. After 2 days of contact, old Cai knew that Fang Yuan, who was forcibly pulled into the cleaning team, was silent most of the time. So, he didn't care and continued to remind, when you put on these clothes, you can only call each other by a code name. Don't expose your identity. For example, my name is Shen. You also think of a code name. Don't expose your identity when we meet later. Code name? Su Buwang scratched his head. His thinking was limited to Shengtian Shrine. If the name related to Shengtian Shrine was exposed, it would not be good. Guo Fengyu smiled and said proudly, "Eldest brother, my codename is Yufeng. I named it by myself. How is it? Is it nice?" Su Buwang rolled his eyes. "It sounds good. I know who you are as soon as I hear it." Guo Fengyu immediately retorted, "It's impossible. No one in the Linli building knows the real identity of old Cai and me. Eldest brother, you can't generalize." I know. Su Buwang thought for a while, "Then I will be called Buhui." Not forgetting was named by that person. How could he not forget his mother? I don't believe it. I am willing to leave, give up the identity of Shengtian Shrine, and wander around the world to find the trace of my mother. I will never regret it. Thinking of this, Su Buwang didn't say much. Su Li was silent for a moment and said softly, "Call me Qing Shui. Qing Shui, when I take over Qing Shui Circle, the world will be your backyard. I will help you get back all the sufferings you have suffered. Qing Shui? Good spirit, good name. Buhui, your sister's name is much better than yours." Old man Cai laughed and turned around. "Brother Fang, are you the only one left?" Fang Yuan stared at Su Li and blurted out 2 words. "Fang Kun. Fang Kun. Isn't the Yinyang region the place of Fang Kun?" Old man Cai sighed with emotion. It seemed that he recalled the past, and his tone was inexplicably heavy. Then he hurried on and stopped talking. Speaking of which, Uncle Fang has never revealed his real name. Is he called Fang Kun? Su Buwang thought in his heart and became distressed again. I don't even know the surname of my new sister. Even the 2 characters of Qing Shui are likely to be fake. Alas, why do practitioners like to hide things these days? After the group walked across a blood-red river, they finally saw a large patch of dark clouds in the distance. The sounds of intense fighting reached their ears, but the situation was covered by the blood, so they could not see clearly. Behind the contact point, the several rows of the Black Army could be clearly distinguished. From afar, they looked like many thick black lines that were neat and uniform. Old man Cai took everyone into the last row of the Black Army and reminded everyone solemnly, "We are in the 3rd sequence. 3 hours later, we will go to the battlefield to kill monsters. Get ready. As for the boys, you just hide behind and protect yourselves. Do you understand?" "Yes." Guo Fengyu took the lead to agree. But if one saw his excited face through the bamboo hat, it was obvious that he was not going to obey. He knew about the bloody circle and the current situation was critical. Unfortunately, old man Cai had always been unwilling to take him here. Now that he finally got the opportunity, how could he not go in and have a look? Su Buwang seemed to be much calmer. After all, Shengtian Shrine was the top holy sect. Even if he was an invisible person who was disliked, his father was the Emperor of Evil, who had a high status and was second only to the Palace Lord. He had experienced much more than Guo Fengyu. Since the Bloody Circle is the biggest hidden danger in the Yinyang region, there are 3 forces in Ju City. Why are you the only ones here? Fang Yuan glanced at the black clothes in the distance and couldn't help but ask. Before old man Cai answered, there was a hearty voice next to him. Are you a casual practitioner who has just joined the force? There is more than one Bloody Circle. There are many small bloody circles. Our Leanly building will resist the largest one, and the rest will be handed over to the Liang Villa and the Morning Soul House. This is a clear division of labor. At this point, the burly man who spoke tilted his bamboo hat to the side and winked a little. Old man Shenong, you really like to hide. This time, the bloody circle is in a critical situation, and you actually bring a senior. Old man Cai frowned and said lightly, it's just a coincidence. How can you see that he is a senior? Ha 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 ha. The burly man pointed at the bamboo hat. Although this thing can block the spiritual awareness, my eyes are not broken. This brother has a calm temperament and doesn't panic in the face of danger. At first glance, I can tell that you have seen the world. On the contrary, these turnips are all young. Are they the juniors that old man Shenong brought to see the world? Fang Yuan turned his head and saw that Su Li had hidden behind Su Buwang. She was timid and very scared. Fang Yuan couldn't help but twitch his eyebrows and feet. He couldn't help but think of her again. Could it be that beautiful women all had superb acting skills? The new generation excels the old. The cause of fighting against the bloody circle always needs to be inherited by the descendants. Old man Shenong, I really think highly of you this time. In the past, when I saw you come alone, I really thought that you were a loner who only knew how to farm. Old man Cai's eyes were full of anger. Taizhan, if I didn't know that you are a straightforward boy, I would send you down the mountain. My food supply is running out. Oh, don't. Please calm down. I have so many descendants to raise. The food supply can't be cut off. Seeing Tieshan's fear, Guofengyu almost laughed out loud. She had seen Uncle Taizhan. He was straightforward and didn't like to cover his face. So, he had revealed his true identity early. Uncle Tieshan's real name is Wang Taizhan. Guofengyu transmitted the sound to Su Buwang and Su Li in a low voice. Uncle Taizhan is an excellent person. He has a good wife and many children and grandchildren at home. His family style is very good. When I was wandering in the early years, I even asked for food. That family was the only one who didn't drive me away and took me in for a meal. They also wanted to adopt me, but I was stubborn at that time and didn't agree. Then I met old man Cai. Su Buwang patted Guofengyu's bamboo hat and said sadly, don't talk about your shameful past in the future. Just like me, I will never say that I was chased by people until I had nowhere to go and even disguised as a woman. Big brother, didn't you say it? While everyone was laughing and talking, Su Li didn't say a word. She spread out her divine awareness and shuttled back and forth under many black bamboo hats. The tactical matrix on the bamboo hat was of the 10th grade, which was very good. But for her, it was nothing. The battle line stretched for hundreds of miles. Su Li's divine awareness didn't stop until it reached the center of the Black Army. Finally, she saw a man with a cyan fox mask. He was tall and steady like a mountain. Su Li frowned and her divine awareness stayed above the man. The tactical matrix on the mask is more than the 12th grade. I can't see through it unless I touch it myself. At this moment, a man in a black bamboo hat came over and gave a jade slip. Lord Shuo, Lord Sin sent a message from the front line. The man with the cyan fox mask took it. Su Li saw this scene with her divine awareness and thought. It turns out that he is Shuo. The mask is very similar to Ling Qinglan's mask. But Ling Qinglan is still in Jiuzhou region and her soul has just recovered. So, it is definitely not him. Who is the one with the code name Sin? After thinking for a moment, the man with the cyan fox mask had crushed the jade slip in his hand. His voice was lost through the mask and was a bit weird. But it still couldn't hide the determination in his words. Since there is one more Shueji, Sin can't deal with it. Let the second and third sequences go in at the same time to force back the blood tide and open the way for me. I will go in person. As soon as the words came out, the messenger was so shocked that his bamboo hat fell to the ground. Lord, you can't do that. If you leave, there will be no commander. The morale of the army will be in chaos. When the blood tide rushes into Ju City, the people in Yinyang region will be in misery and suffering. The man with the cyan fox mask stopped and was surrounded by cyan luster. Su Li immediately recognized the familiar light. Chiyu evil skill. This man was Su Qingtan. Could it be him? Su Li's heart fluctuated for a moment, but she soon calmed down. Since she was here, it wouldn't be strange to see anyone. At this moment, the man with the cyan fox mask said again, "How is Luo, who came back a few days ago?" "Lord Luo is seriously injured and in a coma." The man with the cyan fox mask took a deep breath and thought for a moment. Then he said in a deep voice, "Send a message to all the golden stewards to gather masters to go to the depths of the bloody realm to help. There are many reclusive practitioners in Yinyang region. I don't believe that they won't stand out if they know that Yinyang region is about to be destroyed." Chapter 546. Hearing this, Su Li quietly withdrew her divine awareness. The Linli building was still using the old style. It was not difficult to guess that Oldman Cai, who was in charge of the granary, was probably at this level. Sure enough, after a while, the noise of the whole army suddenly quieted down. Taizhan and Oldman Cai stopped talking and looked at each other. Both of them saw the seriousness and awe in each other's eyes. Oldman Cai pinched the Linli card in his hand and looked nervous. The front line was in an emergency. They didn't even know how much burden Lord Shuo and others were shouldering. It was ridiculous that he still guarded his own territory. He even had some resentment and didn't want to have more contact with the top management of the Linli building. How childish. Brother Fang, tell me the truth. Just how high is your cultivation? Huashan realm? Taking a deep breath, Oldman Cai suddenly took off his bamboo hat and looked directly at Fang Yuan. Fang Yuan was stunned. Taizhan also took off his bamboo hat and looked at Oldman Cai with a complicated expression. "It's you, Oldman Cai. It turns out that you are not dead. But I have become a useless old man." Oldman Cai shook his head and still focused on Fang Yuan. "I just received a message that the front line of the blood circle is in an emergency. Lord Shuo has no way to help, so he sent a message to us and asked us to gather hidden seniors to help." Fang Yuan frowned and was silent. He hadn't figured out whether the Linli building was the real Linli building or not. He didn't even have direct contact with the blood circle. How could he make a decision? "Brother." Oldman Cai glanced at Taizhan. "I went to the front line in those years. No ordinary practitioner could survive there. When I went there, I was in the middle stage of Huashan realm. I survived, but my cultivation regressed to the Jindan realm. So far, I haven't made any progress. Now more than 700 years have passed. I can't guarantee whether the situation in the front line is better or worse than before." Taizhan was silent. The situation in those years was much more serious than now. The front line was almost filled with people's lives to barely save the Yinyang region. For this reason, Oldman Cai's son and daughter-in-law both died in the battle, and his daughter-in-law and the Guo family didn't come back alive. Even if I were to go, it would be meaningless for these old bones of mine. Oldman Cai's eyes were filled with tears. "I thought that the Linli building would grow stronger in these years, and I could comfort my son and daughter-in-law's family." "Cai," Taishan suddenly said. His white teeth were very dazzling in the blood. "I missed it last time, but I can't hide this time." Old man Cai trembled as he looked at Iron Mountain. His lips trembled, but he didn't know what to say. 9 out of 10 people would die on this trip, but could he stop it? With a sigh, Mr. Cai turned to look at Fang Yuan and said, "Brother, I won't force you. Everyone has the right to choose in the face of life and death. What's more, you just came to the Yinyang region, so you don't need to risk your life. If you're not strong enough, I'll just pretend that nothing happened." Fang Yuan's eyebrows suddenly relaxed. He figured it out. Now was different from the past. Instead of continuing to explore carefully, it was better to take the initiative to attack. "My cultivation is higher than you can imagine. In fact, it's much higher. I can help you, but I have a condition." Fang Yuan took off his bamboo hat, and the pressure of nature's test covered the two people who were horrified. He said calmly, "I want to see your senior." Crossing calamity stage? The azure fox-masked man was a little surprised when he received the news. With such cultivation, where can't he go in the world? Why does he need to hide in the yin-yang region? Thinking of this, the azure fox-masked man was a little excited. If he is willing to help, the pressure on the front line will be greatly reduced. Yes. Lead the way. I'll see him in person. A moment later, the azure fox-masked man arrived. A large area had been isolated around Fang Yuan, and a big tactical matrix was set up around it. Even Old Man Cai and Iron Mountain were excluded. Uncle Fang has such a powerful background. Big brother, don't tell me you're also some big shot? Guo Fengyu stared at Su Buwang and was full of surprise. No, I'm not. Su Buwang waved his hand impatiently. Did Uncle Fang take the wrong medicine? Why did he suddenly expose himself and meet with the senior? What should he do if he was in danger? By the way, Sister Qingshui. Su Buwang thought of Su Li, but saw her serious face. He immediately thought of something and didn't disturb her. In the big tactical matrix, Fang Yuan looked at the azure fox-masked man calmly and said slowly, "Since it's urgent, I'll make it short." "Who are you?" The azure fox-masked man trembled slightly, but he couldn't stop laughing. "Although Brother Fang has experienced many vicissitudes, I recognize you at a glance." He pulled off the mask without hesitation and revealed a face that was also much more mature. "Do you remember me, brother? I'm Su Qinghao. It's great to see you at this time." Fourth brother. Su Li was stunned. The silly boy in those days was now Lord Shuo, who could take charge independently. Fang Yuan looked relaxed. "It turns out to be you. So, was the Linli building established by your brother?" Su Qinghao shook his head. "I don't know. My brother and I joined it later. It took us some time to deal with the affairs of the sect." "Oh." Fang Yuan recalled Su Qinghao's identity. "You and Su Qingtan belong to the Shungbei sect. It must have taken you a lot of effort to get out." "Yes." Su Qinghao remembered the time when Brother Duan took him to be chased. He sighed with emotion. "Brother Fang, when we were being chased, we often heard your name and even thought that you had been here for a long time. You are the only Grand Holy Son from the 4 major sacred sects to leave. This is also the reason why I didn't suspect you to be a spy from Glory Sect the moment I saw you. Run away? That's what the outside world says." Fang Yuan smiled bitterly. The treasure of Tianhe was still in his body. In addition, the sect had always treated the matter of the reincarnation state gently, so he couldn't feel bad. How could he let go of the Tianhe sect? "Big brother Fang, there's no time to lose. Let's hurry to the front line." Big brother and the others couldn't hold on any longer. They're all heavily injured and struggling to resist. Fang Yuan made up his mind. "Let's go. Since it is the real Linli building, I will try my best as a former protector." Lord Shino, Lord Iron Mountain. Lord Fang Kun has gone to the front lines. The crisis is temporarily averted. Lord Iron Mountain's application to go to the front lines has been rejected by Lord Shuo. Please return to the 3rd sequence and continue to wait to clear out the blood tide. After the messenger left, Old Cai and Iron Mountain breathed a sigh of relief. Then, smiles appeared on their faces. "You've done a great service this time, Old Man Cai. You brought such a powerful expert with you, and you even got Magistrate Shuo to lift the alarm. I didn't expect it either." Old Cai sighed with emotion. Thinking that he pretended to be profound to threaten Fang Yuan a few days ago, he couldn't help but feel a little sad. Why didn't my son and others encounter such a good thing in those days? "Uncle Fang," Su Buwang murmured and was a little worried. Su Li stood aside, and her eyes flickered slightly. According to the description of the 4th brother, the Linli building was really built by an old friend, and many old subordinates of the Linli building were won over. If her identity was revealed, she would take over this force instantly. But it may also be a trap. Su Li thought deeply. As time went by, the 3rd sequence had come to the front. Suddenly, a bloody smell came. With the hot airwaves, a large number of exhausted practitioners with bloodstains began to return from the blood fog. 3rd sequence, out. As the head of the guarding big tactical matrix shouted, all practitioners stepped into the blood fog without hesitation. After the smoke passed, dense bloody insects came into view. These insects were of different sizes. The small ones were as small as ants, and the big ones were as high as a mountain. Their shells were full of barbs, which were extremely ferocious. Guo Fengyu gasped, "What kind of monsters are these?" Su Buwang looked a little confused and didn't respond. Tai Shan took out 2 huge hammers and said, "Old Cai, I didn't bring my juniors this time. I'll go first." After that, he rushed in and started killing without waiting for old Cai to say anything. Old Cai shook his head and turned back to tell Su Li carefully, "These insects are transformed from blood. The only weakness is the black mark on the top of their heads. After breaking it, it can be turned into blood and integrated into the ground. But it will be reborn soon. What we have to do is to prevent their number from increasing sharply and kill as many as possible. You 3 can choose some small ones to kill, but remember not to be too far away from me." "Buwang, boy, where are you going?" Before old Cai finished his words, he suddenly found that Su Buwang had walked to the front of the insect tide. He couldn't help but be shocked, but it was too late to stop him. Su Buwang's eyes were dull, as if he didn't hear old Cai's words at all, and continued to walk forward. However, the next scene made old Cai even more shocked. Clatter, all the bloody insects, no matter big or small, made away and crawled on the ground, as if they were greeting their most noble king. They would rather be killed than move. What's going on? Everyone around was stunned and didn't know what was going on. Before old Cai finished his shock, a black light flashed in front of him and followed Su Buwang. "Is that the little girl?" Old man Cai watched in a daze as she passed through the swarm of worms. The worms were as fragile as paper in front of her, and they were blown away by the wind. Grandpa Cai, Guo Fengyu, came to his senses and said reluctantly, "I didn't dare to tell you. Among the 3 people before, it was not Uncle Fang, but the elder sister." Old Cai's eyes widened. "How could you hide such an important thing from me?" Swish. Su Li stopped beside Su Buwang and waved her hand in front of his eyes. No response. "Is your mind taken away by something?" Su Li pinched the crawling bloody insects around her and thought for a long time. She relaxed her eyebrows and stared at Su Buwang's side face gently. She smiled sweetly, "No matter what it is, I will accompany you this time. I won't let you be in danger." Unfortunately, Su Buwang couldn't hear it. Blood covered the sky. The hill-sized bloody insects behind Fang Yuan fell to the ground and turned into a puddle. There was no blood on his black clothes. When he looked up, he saw the dark sky. "They should be here." Boom. A line of blood brushed past him and blasted into the ground. Not long after, a ragged man walked out of the blood mist again with a cold expression. When he saw Fang Yuan, there was a fluctuation in his eyes. "It's you." Fang Yuan was stunned when he saw the familiar face, and then he smiled, "Long time no see." Chapter 547. You're getting older. Ling Mo curled his lips slightly, and his cold eyes flashed. A white knife light was drawn out from the bloody mist and fell into his hand. He became sharp like a knife. "You've grown old, but your temperament hasn't changed at all." Fang Yuan showed a rare smile. He didn't make any movement, but a gorgeous river emerged behind him, which even squeezed the bloody mist to fade a lot. "Those who are seriously injured should rest at home. Leave the rest to me." Fang Yuan turned around, and the river above instantly enlarged. It rolled back like a huge wave and filled the sky. Ling Mo took a deep breath, and a trace of tiredness flashed in his eyes. But he didn't take a rest as he was told. Instead, he said, "Be careful, there are 2 of them." Boom. Before Ling Mo could finish his words, there were 2 huge and ferocious bloody bird heads squeezed into the middle of the river and screamed at Ling Mo. Ling Mo looked slightly serious. He changed the gesture in his hands and shouted, "Break." The water-colored river instantly froze for thousands of miles, turning into a glacier that was 1,000 feet tall. The white cold air condensed into a stream that rushed into the ears of the blood-colored bird's head, then turned into an icicle that pierced out. Poochie. Dark red blood flowed into the river and dyed a small area red. The bloody mist quieted down, but Fang Yuan still looked cold and did not relax his vigilance. He didn't believe that the monster that could make the leanly building helpless was so weak. Cough. Their vital point is not their head. Ling Mo walked over with a knife and stared at the quiet glacier. Suddenly, his eyes were fixed. He's here. Boom. The huge force fiercely struck the glacier, shattering it in the blink of an eye. The violent shockwave set off a gale that instantly engulfed the two of them. What's that sound? There was a loud noise just now. Did you hear it? The deafening sound spread far into the distance. With the exception of the cultivators who were fighting in the blood tide, all the other cultivators heard it and could not help but look towards the source of the sound. Su Qinghao stood in the center of the army and didn't move at all. It seemed that everything was under his control. But under the mask of the Cyan Fox, he was extremely worried. Brother Fang, Brother Ling. In the blood tide, Su Buwang walked forward blankly, unaware of the changes in the outside world. Beside him, Su Li looked up at the front not far away, and her eyes flickered. What a strong fluctuation. It's at the late stage of the tribulation passing stage, and there's more than one of them. If it was 6 years ago, I wouldn't have been a match for him if I didn't use my trump card. With Fang Yuan's cultivation, it is not a problem to hold on for a while. Su Li thought, and her figure always followed Su Buwang. About the change of Unforgettable, she had already thought of some speculation. Back then, she gave birth to Unforgettable in the reincarnation mirror. Although it was a decision made in a hurry, the firm memory was extremely clear, and the process was as vivid as yesterday. I killed Lin Yanxing and got something. Could it be? A trace of hesitation flashed in Su Li's eyes. She was not sure whether this opportunity was good or bad for Unforgettable. After hesitating for a long time, she did not stop Su Buwang and continued to let him move forward. In the center of the explosion, a large number of ice cubes floated in the air and condensed into a huge ice ball, protecting Fang Yuan and Su Li that power. Fang Yuan's eyes were dignified. He breathed out, and his slightly pale face slowly became ruddy. You can hold on until now. Ling Mo seemed to be unable to hold on and sat on the ground. When he heard this, he was silent for a moment and said, "The Linli building has been destroyed once. It must not be destroyed for the second time. Speaking of it, you belonged to the Enmore cult in the past. Why do you call yourself a member of the Linli building now?" Ling Mo snorted and turned his head. Seeing this, Fang Yuan said no more. It always felt good to meet old friends. The past had become smoke, and there was no need to make the relationship too stiff. Clatter, the glacier melted into water and turned into a river again, hanging over Fang Yuan's head. Boom! Boom! The dull footsteps shook away the surrounding bloody mist. The wounds on the heads of the two bloody strange birds had disappeared, and their bodies, which were nearly 100 meters long, appeared in front of people. The giant birds are not living creatures, but transformed from blood. Ling Mo stared at the giant birds that were still ready to move. Do you see the small cyan mark under its body? If we can break through it, the birds will die instantly. Fang Yuan nodded, squinted his eyes, and suddenly smiled. It's so simple. Ling Mo was stunned and frowned. Does the Tianhe sect have any special long-range attack means? No. Fang Yuan smiled indifferently. The Tianhe sect doesn't, but the Linli building does. Ling Mo's pupils shrank suddenly. A dazzling and bright sword light suddenly flashed out. It was so fast that even Ling Mo could only see a residual shadow. AO sword skills. Su Li stopped and saw the two people not far away in the divine awareness. She couldn't help but smile slightly. AO sword skills. Fang Yuan, you have found your own way on the sword after all. However, such an attack can't take away the two behemoths. So, let me help you. Her eyes suddenly brightened as if it was daytime. The fierce and destructive sword intent instantly passed through the nothingness and merged into the white light. The next moment, the two cyan marks were torn like paper. Boom! The giant birds fell down and stirred up the smoke. Not far away, there were two men like wooden stakes. So easy. Fang Yuan frowned and began to doubt the strength of the Linli building now. Fang Yuan is so strong. Ling Mo was slightly stunned and felt a little bitter. It's really the top holy sect. At the same time, plop. Su Buwang suddenly stopped. He rolled his eyes and fell flat on his face. Su Li gently picked him up and touched the wounds on his face. In a moment, all the wounds disappeared and he recovered. It's related to the two strange birds. I killed them, so Su Buwang can't find the direction? If I knew it. Su Li's frown suddenly disappeared. Well, don't worry. In the peripheral area, with the death of the strange birds, the blood tide slowly retreated into the depths of the blood mist. Many practitioners who saw this change were stunned at first, and then they were all happy. It retreated. It must be the Lord who went deep into the blood mist killed the key monsters. The blood tide can't affect here. Yes. It's estimated that it will return to its original state after a while. Finally, we can rest for 2 days. Su Qinghao breathed a sigh of relief, and then he was worried again. It's so fast. Did the eldest brother pay any price? Fortunately, as soon as this thought appeared, he saw 2 figures with intact hands and feet slowly walking out of the blood mist. Welcome back, Lord Zui and Lord Fang Kun, someone shouted. The crowd of cultivators fell silent for a moment before they all followed suit and shouted. Welcome back, Lord Zui and Lord Fang Kun, welcome back. Fang Ling Yuan raised his eyebrows slightly and whispered, Sin? Ling Mo, what crime did you commit? Ling Mo's expression was slightly gloomy. He shook his head without explaining and turned away. Su Qinghao was not surprised and walked to Fang Yuan. Eldest brother Fang, you must be tired. Come with me to the territory of the Linli building to have a rest. I didn't come alone. Ling Mo turned his head and saw Elder Cai and his grandson in the crowd. His face suddenly changed and he had a bad feeling. In Jueqing, there were more than 200 restaurants opened by the Linli building. Each one was exactly the same as the layout in the reincarnation mirror. At this moment, on the top floor of one of the restaurants. What? They rushed into the blood tide. Fang Yuan heard what Elder Cai said and immediately walked out, but he was stopped by Su Qinghao. Eldest brother, calm down. Who are they? What kind of appearance? You just came to Jueqing and are not familiar with the people and the place. Let me find them. Fang Yuan took a deep breath and looked at Elder Cai, who was ashamed. He said word by word, Su Buwang. What? Su Qinghao's face changed dramatically in an instant. He took out a white jade token and said solemnly, immediately, dispatch all the men of sacrifice to go to the blood circle to find. Speaking of this, Su Qinghao looked up at Fang Yuan. Eldest brother Fang, do you have anything with Su Buwang's pneuma and appearance? They are all here. Fang Yuan handed out a storage ring. These are the things he usually used for practice. Then he walked to the desk and described Su Buwang's appearance with a few strokes. It looks like my sister. Su Qinghao's eyes were a little sore. He picked up the paper and went out immediately. Elder Cai stood by the door, trembling with fear. He was more awed by the identity of Fang Yuan and his fellows. Lord Zhuo, who was in charge of all the daily affairs of the Linli building, called Fang Kun eldest brother. He was just one of the middle-level members of the Linli building. He called Fang Kun younger brother Fang before. Wasn't he overstepping his authority? Guo Fengyu was absent-minded, and her eyes were shining. Su Buwang, Lord Zhuo's eyes almost popped out when he heard the name. Eldest brother Su, you are really extraordinary. At this moment, Su Buwang stood on the brightly lit street, looked up at the always dark sky, and saw the lively crowd around him. He was confused. Am I not killing monsters in the blood circle? Where is this? Su Buwang sighed and pinched his nose. Why does it hurt a little? It seems that I have been beaten. Uncle Fang is gone, and Sister Qingshui is also gone. What is going on? Su Buwang had a toothache. He went to a tea stall on the street and sat down. He shouted, "Waiter, give me a pot of tea." "Okay, please wait a moment." The clever-looking waiter immediately came over with a pot of tea. He was stunned when he saw Su Buwang's appearance. Then he suddenly remembered something. His eyes widened, and the kettle in his hand fell to the ground. He tremblingly took out a piece of paper from his arms. Su Buwang saw that something was wrong. He glanced at the person on the paper. Wasn't that himself? "It's you," the waiter shouted excitedly, which scared Su Buwang and made him run away immediately. "Don't run away. The waiter immediately panicked and chased after Su Buwang. Su Buwang immediately ran faster, but his mind was confused. He recalled with a look of horror, could it be that when I lost my memory, I did something heinous and unforgivable? Then I was wanted by the whole city. Oh my God! What the hell is going on? Chapter 548. Su Buwang's cultivation in Jindan realm was still not good enough. After escaping from 2 workshops, he found that he was surrounded by a group of people in bamboo hats who dressed the same as him. I say, seniors. Su Buwang cupped his fists cautiously. Why do you chase me? I think. One of the men in black took out the drawing and compared it several times. Then he said to the leader, it's him. Take him back. Lord Shua ordered us not to hurt him. The leading man in bamboo hat nodded and said loudly, little fellow practitioner, don't panic. We are equal to the Leanly building and will not hurt you. Lord Shua invites you to come over for a chat. Su Buwang looked a little relaxed, but he was still a little vigilant. Lord Shua? I have heard of this name, but I have no relationship with him. Why does he invite me? The leader couldn't help laughing. Then we don't know. The Leanly building will not kill innocent people, and the location is in a crowded restaurant nearby. You can rest assured. Su Buwang glanced at the dark surroundings and shrugged, looking at the situation, I have to go. After a while, Su Buwang came to the front of the Leanly restaurant. It seems that it is the property of the Leanly building. I really believe in you. If I go in, you will have the final say in everything you do. Su Buwang looked up and saw the plaque. When he was about to turn around and leave, the surrounding people in bamboo hats couldn't stop him. When he was in a dilemma, suddenly a familiar voice came into his ears. Buwang. Su Buwang suddenly turned back and saw the slovenly face. His eyes suddenly brightened. Uncle Fang. Lord Fang Kun. The surrounding people in bamboo hats in black immediately saluted together. Su Buwang was stunned and couldn't help but transmit the sound. Uncle Fang, have you entered the enemy's territory so soon? Fang Yuan was suddenly speechless. You go upstairs with me first. Su Buwang scratched his head, responded and followed. On the top floor, Su Qinghao was restless. Suddenly he heard footsteps. He looked up and saw Su Buwang's face. His heart suddenly stopped. It's true, the evil emperor is soft-hearted after all. Su Qinghao's eyes were slightly wet. My sister's flesh and blood is still in this world. That's great. Uncle Fang, look, the way this person looks at me is so strange. After being stared at for a long time, Su Buwang felt uncomfortable and couldn't help but transmit the sound. Qinghao. Fang Yuan called, and Su Qinghao immediately came to his senses. He recovered as usual, stood up and smiled. You are Su Buwang, right? When you disappeared just now, it really made your Uncle Fang anxious. So it's Uncle Fang who's looking for me. Su Buwang suddenly understood and scratched his head. I don't know what happened. It seems that I lost a piece of memory. When I woke up again, I was already standing on the street. I don't know what happened before. There's such a thing. Fang Yuan frowned. He had learned about the situation in the blood tide from old Cai. Little friend Buwang, how did you form a connection with the blood realm? Su Qinghao sat down. I heard from Elder Cai that you lost consciousness in the blood tide and rushed directly into it. What? Su Buwang was stunned and immediately touched his whole body. Then how could I be unscathed? That's the strange thing. When the blood tide saw you, it actually gave way and even knelt down to worship you. They were unwilling to hurt you. Su Qinghao said in confusion. Suddenly, he remembered something and said, by the way, there was a woman who chased you at that time. Why didn't I see her today? You mean Qing Shui? My sister went in with me. Su Buwang widened his eyes and stood up. His voice became anxious. Why didn't I know? I didn't see her after I came out. Is Sister Qing Shui still in the blood tide? She won't. I don't forget. Fang Yuan interrupted Su Buwang's imagination. His steady tone was inexplicably calm. With Miss Qing Shui's cultivation, she can come and go freely in the blood tide. You don't have to worry about her. But she is, after all, We just met Qingshui by chance. Did she chase you or for something else? Fang Yuan's tone sank slightly. It's hard to say. Uncle Fang, you actually suspect Sister Qingshui? Su Buwang raised his eyebrows. If she hadn't helped us, we might have died in the Jianyang desert. How can you think so? Fang Yuan was silent. People were always complicated. With the cultivation of the woman, she might be soft-hearted and did it casually to save them. No one could tell the real purpose of her coming to Ju City. Brother Fang, the Qingshui you mentioned, Su Qinghao was confused. It seemed that Elder Cai omitted a lot of details from him in order not to be punished. A mysterious female practitioner. Fang Yuan paused and said, her cultivation is still higher than mine. Her mind is unpredictable. She may still be in Ju City. I don't know the purpose of her coming here. But I once heard that she came here to join the Linli building. Now you show up, but she hides. It seems that what she said is false. Qingshui? Qingshui Circle. This name is really casual. Su Qinghao murmured, since she has disappeared and there are few clues, it's no use to think too much. I will let the spies pay attention. The most urgent thing is the Bloody Circle. Fang Yuan nodded and thought for a moment. He asked, how many monsters like the strange bird are there? How can we eliminate the influence of the Bloody Circle? It can't be done in a day. Su Qinghao shook his head and sighed. He glanced at Su Buwang. Brother, come with me to meet your old friend. I haven't seen you for 1,000 years. Okay. Fang Yuan got up and said to Su Buwang, who was still at a loss, you can wander around in the Linli building. There will be no danger. I'll be back soon. Uncle Fang, don't worry. I'm smart. Su Buwang smiled and thought to himself. This Shuo called Uncle Fang eldest brother. Tut, the Linli building is really powerful. No wonder Uncle Fang had to come to find me when he heard it. If you hide here, you don't have to be afraid of being killed by Shengtian Shrine. But how to find my mother? Let's not talk about Su Buwang's distress first. After Fang Yuan and Su Qinghao ran for a while, they came to the base camp of the Linli building. A branch of the Linli building opened in a remote alley and looked old. No one can imagine that the headquarters of the Linli building, which can't be found everywhere, is a shop. Su Qinghao said and walked into the shop. Fang Yuan paused at the door. He turned his head and saw a closed wine shop next to the shop. He was in a trance and even felt that he went back to the past for a moment. Juyu Tavern. Brother Fang. Brother Fang. A group of people suddenly rushed out of the shop and called Fang Yuan with excitement and surprise on their faces. Fang Yuan came to his sense and looked at the first face in the crowd. He smiled and said, Haydn, everyone, long time no see. Haydn's face was a little red with excitement. Brother Fang, I knew that you would come here. Let's rebuild the Linli building together. Okay. Fang Yuan responded. He looked up and saw that Ling Mo was drinking at the table. Ling Mo was drinking at the table. He walked over and sat down. Haydn immediately handed him a glass. Why are you drinking alone? Fang Yuan picked up the flagon on the table. Ling Mo glanced up and said casually, the others are still lying down. If you don't come, no one will accompany you. Fang Yuan laughed and then stopped smiling. He took out a palm-sized jade bottle with river patterns and put it on the table. Take me to see them. You have a whole bottle of the healing panacea of the Tianhe sect. Ling Mo picked it up and looked at Fang Yuan deeply. He picked up the flagon with the other hand and went upstairs. Follow me. They passed through the back hall and entered the rockery secret passage. After passing several defense checkpoints, they came to a spacious quiet room. Just standing in front of the door, they could smell the fragrance of medicine lingering in the room for a long time. This is a quiet room specially for healing. Ling Mo gave a brief introduction and opened the stone door. Rows of familiar figures who were meditating and healing came into view. Su Qingtan, the former guards of the Yunwei, and some former subordinates of the Enmore cult. Fang Yuan was shocked. Su Qingtan heard the noise and opened his eyes first. He thought it was Ling Mo and Su Qinghao. But when he saw Fang Yuan's figure, he immediately realized that something was wrong. You are, Su Qingtan's face changed. He couldn't help laughing and coughed. Ahum, the young lord of the Tianhe sect should condescend to be here. Don't talk nonsense. Take the healing panacea first. Fang Yuan frowned. Ling Mo handed out the pills and distributed them. Yun Yi was also alarmed and woke up. When he saw Fang Yuan, he was shocked at first and then smiled. He put the pills into his mouth and asked, I heard that you left the Tianhe sect and have been looking for a way to resurrect the master these years. Have you found anything? If I have, I will not come here alone. Fang Yuan shook his head and sat aside, but have you ever thought of a way after rebuilding the Linli building in these years? It's not so easy. Su Qingtan shook his head and sighed, it is very difficult to maintain the existence of the yin-yang domain. Now your joining is a timely help and temporarily solves the crisis. The yin-yang domain can't be destroyed. Otherwise, we will be exposed to the deduction skill. Either the Fate Ancestor or the Huangxing Hall can easily find us. Yun Yi took a deep breath, we have been holding on for thousands of years. We can't die like this. Fang Yuan glanced at others. Although they all had unusual backgrounds, they had the same firmness on their faces at the moment. They clearly knew all the truth, but they still didn't want to wake up from the dream in the reincarnation mirror. They even didn't hesitate to fight against the sect and bear the infamy of betraying the sect. Was it worth it? The cold lines on Fang Yuan's face softened a little. Tell me, what is the situation of the blood circle? I don't know, but, after a long time of contact, we speculate. Ling Mo's eyes flashed. If we want to destroy it, we must go deep into the center of the blood circle. There must be something that can continuously produce blood monsters. The strange bird you killed today was bred. Even if you destroy the strange bird, those monsters will reappear in a few days. But the deeper we go into the blood circle, the more blood monsters there are. The efficacy of the medicine in Yun Yi's body began to work, and his face was a little ruddy. But when he thought of the battle that day, his tone was still gloomy. There are more than 20 blood monsters as high as 300 meters, and some are as high as 500 meters or even thousands of meters. They are frightening from a distance. With our cultivation, we can't win. Fang Yuan glanced at a group of wounded people in the room, and his tone was as calm as a mountain. You heal as soon as possible. I will find a way. Chapter 549. In the blink of an eye, it was night. Ling Mo held the flagon and rested his head on the tiles. No one knew what he was thinking. Suddenly, a black shadow floated to his side and sat down. It was Fang Yuan. There is no moon at night in the yin-yang region. What are you doing on the roof? Ling Mo didn't look at Fang Yuan, but just looked at the dark sky. Have you figured out the method? It's not so fast. Fang Yuan narrowed his eyes. You and I are not talkative. I just want to ask you one question, and then I can make a decision. I know what you want to ask. Ling Mo said casually, I don't know. In Qingshui Circle, I used to be the seed of the Shura sect, and I only knew how to kill people. In the reincarnation mirror, I knew the rich emotions of the human world and what comrades are. Only then did I know that people also have flesh and blood, and life is not the most important thing. Fang Yuan chuckled. Comrades? Who do you think is a comrade? All the boys of the Enmore cult. Ling Mo sat up and glanced at Fang Yuan. A light flashed in his eyes, except the Emperor of Evil who killed his own son. Fang Yuan was silent for a moment and said, Su Buwang is still alive. What? Ling Mo's face changed. It's impossible. I clearly saw it with my own eyes. Bu Wang has been following me all these years. Now he is in Ju City, in the Linli building. Speaking of Su Buwang, Fang Yuan's face became gentle. He looks like Su Li, not like his father at all. But I don't know who he is like. He is very lively. Is he here? Ling Mo couldn't sit still. I really want to see him. So, Ling Li cheated the world at that time. But why did he discredit himself like that? The origin of the people of Shengtian Shrine is complicated. No one can explain it clearly. Bu Wang stayed in Shengtian Shrine for 900 years, and he only hated Ling Li without love. It can be seen what kind of life he had. Fang Yuan said casually and turned to the topic. I heard from Su Qingtan that you were the first to come here. How was the Linli building established? Can you tell me? Ling Mo closed his eyes. When his breath calmed down, he opened his eyes again and whispered, "There is nothing to hide from you. I don't know the identity of that person, but he claimed to be the sworn enemy of the Fate ancestor. He wanted to take revenge through the Linli building. The biggest enemy of Su Li was the Fate ancestor, so I promised to cooperate with him. Later, I don't know how he persuaded the head of the Baichuan mansion. The Linli building directly inherited the foundation of the Baichuan mansion, and then it developed. At this point, he paused. Do you see the Juyu winery next door? Of course. Fang Yuan nodded, very familiar. Xian Jingju and Su Yu also joined the Linli building. In Zholi region, they used Xian Jingzhou's Jiguang sect as a cover to inquire for the Linli building. Although Su Yu lost the memory of reincarnation mirror, she met Xian Jingju and gave birth to a son with him. It can be said that this is fate. So, Su Li's regret is gone. I don't know where she is. Ling Mo took a deep breath and changed his words. At that time, no one witnessed Su Li's death with their own eyes. This is also the reason why you and we haven't given up these years. Fang Yuan nodded, and his eyes were full of firmness. One day, she will appear. She will appear downstairs in front of the gate of the Linli building and tell us I'm back. Su Li covered her face with a veil and whispered to herself. She stood quietly in front of the slightly dilapidated gate. In front of the dilapidated door, a strange light flashed in his eyes, but he did not take another step forward. Constantly making blood monsters. According to Ling Mo's injury, it will take him a few days to heal. In this way, I still have time to go to the Yin region and find some food for Su Bai. Su Li's figure disappeared like smoke. Haydn walked to the door and looked around, but he didn't see anyone. He couldn't help but scratch his head. It's strange. Why do I have a feeling of being peeped at for no reason? A few days later, in the Linli building, Su Qingtan got up and stretched his body. The bones all over his body crackled. After so many days of injury, I finally recover. Thanks to the elixirs brought by Fang Yuan. Yun Yi wiped the flying sword in his hand. In this way, I have a better chance of winning if I go to destroy the blood circle. Ling Mo looked at everyone who was eager for a fight. He glanced at Fang Yuan, who had been silent, and transmitted the sound, "Haven't you told Buwang the truth?" Fang Yuan glanced at Ling Mo's face expressionlessly and said in a muffled voice, "I can't say it. It must be a hard battle to go to the blood circle this time. If I don't say it now." Ling Mo wanted to say something but stopped on second thought. Fang Yuan understood what he meant. His eyes darkened and he turned to go out. "I hid something in his cosmos ring," Li Yarrow said. "What? You won't take me to the blood circle this time?" Su Buwang, who was still eating delicious pastries in the room, suddenly rushed out and grabbed Fang Yuan, who was about to leave. He said solemnly, "Uncle Fang, didn't you say that I was too inexperienced before? How can I become stronger if you don't let me participate in such a big event? This time is different from the past." Su Qinghao was interrupted by Su Buwang. "It's better to be different from the past. The more tragic it is, the more people can be trained. Uncle Fang, how can a practitioner not experience life and death? I'm afraid that you will make trouble." Fang Yuan turned around and looked stern. "You can't even control the part where you lost your memory. If you lose your memory and rush into the blood tide this time, we will definitely be distracted." Su Buwang's voice was stuck in his throat. He recalled what Su Li said in the Yangji Desert, "If it weren't for you, your Uncle Fang would not be poisoned by the ghost." "I see." Su Buwang suddenly let go of his hand and sat down in the room. He said firmly, "I'm here and won't go anywhere. I will never make trouble for you. Uncle Fang, you must come back safely." Fang Yuan was stunned. He wondered if his words were too harsh. When did Wang Yefeng become so obedient? "Of course, we will come back. You wait and don't run around," Su Qinghao said with a smile and patted Uncle Fang's shoulder. "The child is sensible. Elder brother, you should be happy. It's late. If you don't go there, there will be trouble." Fang Yuan took a deep look at Su Buwang and turned away. Today, I will destroy the bloody circle. Su Buwang waited in the room from early morning to noon, and from noon to night, but still no one came back. Uncle Fang. He leaned over the table and played with the teacup in his hand, but his mind was elsewhere. If I can have the same cultivation as Uncle Fang, I can help. Unfortunately, in Shengtian Shrine, I didn't practice any cultivation methods of Shengtian Shrine. They were all rough and scattered. After coming to the outside world, I realized the preciousness of the cultivation methods. If I had known it earlier, I would have stolen it. Thinking of this, Su Buwang sighed. Well, it's fate. Uncle Fang is not young. He must have had many adventures with such profound cultivation. I can't envy him. As he spoke, Su Buwang's eyes gradually became dull, and finally completely turned into nothingness. He suddenly stood up and went out, ignoring the muddle-headed guards on both sides of the door. Heh! The mark I attached to Wang is a little blurred. Is he controlled again? In the Yin realm, Su Li grabbed the ghosts in her hand and put them into Kang Lei's cave. She raised her eyebrows slightly, and her slender palm was as sharp as a knife. She waved it at the nothingness. In an instant, a gate of the isolated city appeared, and Su Li immediately flashed and disappeared. In the bloody circle, the bloody mist was hazy. Fang Yuan and others walked slowly in a group. Ling Mo held a talisman in his hand and frowned. We have gone deep into the bloody circle. Why can't we see a monster? Strange, is there something unusual happening in the bloody circle? Yun Yi was vigilant and doubtful. Something out of the ordinary. Fang Yuan's face was slightly stagnant, and then he thought of something. He suddenly became gloomy and said, "It's Su Buwang. Speed up." Before he finished speaking, Fang Yuan had taken a step and left everyone far away. Ling Mo's face changed slightly, and he caught up without saying a word. Yun Yi and others also followed closely. In the nothingness, Su Buwang only felt that he was walking in a haze, and the light and shadow around him were continuous. He didn't know how long it had been, and finally a picture appeared in the darkness. It was a completely unrelated world called the Dahan dynasty. There was no so-called cultivation circle, only ordinary mortals. Perhaps there were some magic skills and martial arts, but they were legends and couldn't be seen. Among them, there was a place called the Desu town. There was a daughter of the Su family in the town named Su Li, who was not favored since childhood. After that, various forces emerged one after another. The famous Enmore cult, the Linli building founded by Su Li, and the dispute between Ling Li, the hierarch of the Enmore cult, were all in front of him. At first, he was confused, but when he heard the name Ling Li and the name Linli building, he gradually understood that the scene in front of him must be related to his mother. And the key figure in this world, that woman, Su Li, also had the surname Su. Su Buwang forgot everything, and his body and mind were silent in the memory. The picture in front of him finally appeared, the image of that year. Su Li was cheated to death. Because of Su Yu, her relationship with Ling Li fell to the freezing point. Later, she knew the whole truth. After that, every choice she made was stained with blood, until she died and disappeared. Then, Ling Li and Fang Yuan were angry and joined hands to kill 100,000 talents in Qingshui Circle, which was the bloody accident of Holy Spirit. It turns out that the protagonist of the bloody accident of Holy Spirit is my mother. It's a pity that I can't go to my mother's hometown to have a look after passing through Jiuzhou region. Su Buwang's tears slipped down unconsciously, and he murmured softly, "It turns out that my mother gave up herself to give birth to me. Otherwise, I would be a walking corpse without a soul. It turns out that everyone lied to her. Everyone is an enemy, all enemies. Uncle Fang. Fang Yuan, you lied to me so hard. The evil emperor lied to me, and you also lied to me. Ha 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 ha." Su Buwang chuckled for a moment, and then he laughed loudly. His laughter shook the surrounding blood tide, as if the waves of the blood sea surged into the sky. He suddenly raised his head, and his eyes were blood red. "I want revenge." Chapter 550. Yes, Buwang, you have to take revenge. As the blood sea rose and fell, a soft voice came into his ears. It was sad and solemn, like crying, I'm so unwilling to die. You have to kill all the people in the world and let them be my companions. Su Buwang slowly got up with dull eyes. The blood around him couldn't get close to him, and all turned into skeletons and ghost faces swaying around. Go, kill people, and comfort my soul in heaven with blood. Su Buwang stretched out his hand and grasped in the air. The bloody light quickly condensed into a knife light in his hand. If there were others present, they would find that there was a round bloody light shining on his chest. Hey, ha 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 ha, he laughed in a low voice, and his voice gradually became louder and louder. Finally, his wild laughter spread far away. Kill, 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 kill all the people in the world. In the blood mist, Fang Yuan stabbed the dead point of the strange bird with a sword. He was panting and puzzled. Why is this blood monster more difficult to kill than that day? Difficult to kill? Ling Mo's eyes flashed, and he also had doubts in his eyes. The strength of the blood monster has not increased, and it is no different from the one you and I killed that day. Why do you say so? What? Fang Yuan was stunned, and astonishment appeared in his eyes. At this moment, a roar full of killing intent sounded in the nothingness in the distance. Kill, 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 kill all the people in the world. Even if the tone was hoarse, Fang Yuan still recognized it at once. He immediately ignored the doubts in his heart and trembled all over. It's the voice of Buwang. Go, go. Su Qingtan looked at the 4 or 5 blood monsters still blocking in front of him, and then took a deep look at the direction of the voice. Then he made a prompt decision and said, You two have the highest cultivation. Find a chance to go in. Yun Yi and I will stay here to block Xueji. We must bring Buwang back safely. Unconsciously, everyone's goal changed from the original destruction of the blood world to saving Su Buwang. That was the only blood left by Su Li. If Su Buwang died, what was the point of everything they did? Sure. Fang Yuan's eyes were full of killing intent. No matter who you are, you will die today if you dare to kill Buwang. Everyone. Attract Xueji's attention and make way for Fang Yuan and Ling Mo. Yun Yi shouted. These people, who used to be the favored ones of various sects, reacted instantly. They scattered and made a gap in a few seconds. Fang Yuan and Ling Mo looked at each other and went in without saying anything. With a single step, he felt as though he had entered another world. The fog became thicker, and the air was so moist that it could drip blood. I've never been to the center of the blood world. Don't die before I save Bu Wang. Ling Mo transmitted the sound to remind him. Fang Yuan squinted his eyes and stretched out his hand to summon 2 streams of blue ice river to protect them. The water of the azure frost river can resist poison. Ling Mo snorted and did not refuse. Xueji could hardly be seen in the center of the bloody world. Not long after the two moved forward, they saw a blood pool. In the middle of the blood pool, standing quietly on the water surface, was none other than Su Buwang. I won't. Fang Yuan was shocked and was about to go forward, but he was stopped by Ling Mo, who frowned and said, Don't go. There is something wrong with him. Ho ho ho, a hoarse laughter came out. Su Buwang raised his head, revealing an evil and distorted face. His eyes were so red as if they were soaked in blood. The red blade in his hand shone. Fang Yuan and Ling Mo's faces changed instantly, and they both flashed away. Boom! A blood-colored blade light fell from the sky and left a deep pit on the ground. A bottomless pit. Fang Yuan stared at the center of the blood pool, and his eyes were fierce. This power exceeds the nature's test. It's definitely not Bu Wang. Something is controlling him. Ling Mo's face was full of killing intent. When he was about to speak, Su Buwang suddenly spoke. Fang Yuan, Ling Mo, you are all sinners who killed my mother. Why do you hide? You are going to die. You all deserve to die. The calm faces of the two froze at the same time. How do you know the name? How do you know? At the moment when Fang Yuan blurted out the question, he was distracted. The blade light, which had been accumulating power in the dark, chopped down in an instant. Boom! Fang Yuan. Ling Mo's face changed slightly. Seeing that Fang Yuan was drowned by the blood-colored blade light, he was about to rescue him. Su Buwang sneered and waved the blade casually. A blood-colored stripe like a huge mountain appeared without warning and hit Ling Mo's chest head-on. Under the violent shock, Ling Mo was suddenly injured. He raised his head and spat out a mouthful of blood and flew backward. Rubbish, a bunch of rubbish. Go to hell. Ha 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 ha. Su Buwang laughed wildly, and one knife light after another chopped down crazily, without any intention of holding back. No one knew how many times he chopped down. Suddenly, a turbulent river of heaven suddenly appeared. In the blink of an eye, the blood pool was washed clean, and the blade light was crushed. Cough, cough, cough. Fang Yuan jumped out of the bottomless pit with silver light floating in his eyes. He wiped the blood from his mouth and spat out a mouthful of turbid air. Brat, you are serious. Swish. A figure flashed like a flickering light and appeared beside him in an instant. It was Ling Mo who had just been beaten out. This is the treasure of Heaven River. Is it really powerful? I should have thought of it. Ling Mo's eyes were slightly cold. No matter how broad-minded the people of your Tianhe sect are, you can't be indifferent to the treasure being left outside, right? Fang Yuan did not respond. He just looked at Su Buwang, who was drowned by the river just now, and frowned. That feeling was like a blood clot melting in water. It was very sticky, which gave him a very bad feeling. Ho ho ho! Uncle Fang, Uncle Ling, are you going to kill me? A familiar laughter came. Fang Yuan and Ling Mo looked up at the same time. Suddenly, they saw Su Buwang with a smile on his face. He walked in the air with a blade in his hand. He was unscathed. Buwang, you, before Fang Yuan finished his words, he was interrupted by Su Buwang. It seems that I underestimated you two uncles. Just like that, I can't send you down to apologize to my mother. So, the blood in Su Buwang's eyes faded a little, and then he touched the glowing place on his chest and pressed it hard. Fang Yuan and Ling Mo immediately saw a wisp of purple rising above Su Buwang's head and quickly integrated into the blood mist. The blood mist was immediately stimulated and condensed at a very fast speed. The mist is gone. Yun Yi, who was fighting with the 5 Xueji, was stunned, and then he looked happy. Did Fang Yuan and others succeed? But at this moment, the 5 Xueji in front of him suddenly expanded dozens of feet. Oh no! Yun Yi, hide! Su Qingtan was shocked. Yun Yi didn't have time to hide, and he was hit by the Xueji and flew backward. Yun Yi put his feet into the ground and finally stopped after sliding for dozens of meters. He opened his mouth and spat out a mouthful of blood. He gasped, "It's okay. I was careless. Eldest brother, look." Su Qingtan breathed a sigh of relief. But at this moment, Yun San's frightened voice sounded. The sky became darker, and a breath of despair gradually shrouded them. Su Qingtan turned his head stiffly and saw dozens of Xueji, who were hundreds of feet tall, in front of him, had all expanded to more than 5,000 feet. He couldn't help but gasp. What the hell happened? In the center of the bloody world, the mist of the whole bloody world gathered together. In the blink of an eye, the mist was sucked up and condensed into a figure. Su Buwang looked at the mist expectantly, and his eyes were full of desire and expectation. He carefully pointed between the eyebrows of the bloody mist, and flesh and clothes appeared quickly. Then, it became the woman that Fang Yuan wanted to see even in his dreams. Su Buwang, do you know what you are doing? The anger in Fang Yuan's eyes swelled to the extreme. He had imagined the scene of reuniting with Su Li many times, but it was not like this. Su Buwang didn't seem to hear it at all. He just looked at Su Li, who was transformed by the bloody mist, and murmured, "Mother, is so beautiful. Ha ha ha. I asked you to take revenge, but you changed me. You are really a filial child." The bloody mist person covered her mouth and smiled. Her action and demeanor were very similar to Su Li. If Fang Yuan and Yun San didn't see the process of Su Li forming, they might not be able to distinguish it for a while. You dare to blaspheme her like this? I want you to die. Fang Yuan growled, and the river all over the sky tilted down. In the blink of an eye, it turned into countless icicles and shot at them. Little guys, we could live in peace, but you have to kill me. Then don't blame me for being cruel. The bloody mist person's beautiful eyes flashed, and she gently waved her sleeve. All the icicles instantly rolled back and counterattacked Fang Yuan. Fang Yuan and Ling Mo jumped away at the same time, but there were too many icicles. After all, they didn't completely dodge. They both groaned, and their shoulders and right abdomen were penetrated. The bloody mist person took a light breath and was a little intoxicated. You really deserve to be a talent. The taste of your blood is different from that of ordinary practitioners. I haven't eaten for a long time. I am really lucky to have such delicious food as soon as I open the door. Fang Yuan pursed his lips and didn't say a word. He called back the treasure of the Milky Way. His eyes were red. He made gestures with both hands, bit the tip of his tongue, and drew a huge rune of kill. The Milky Way receives the order. Kill. Fight to the death. The broken Milky Way was immediately reorganized and turned into a huge sword of heaven hanging upside down in the nothingness. Its power swept wildly, and in the blink of an eye, it surpassed the late stage of nature's test. Fang Yuan's face also turned pale at a speed visible to the naked eye. Ling Mo's eyes were gloomy. He flashed into the dark, and in less than half a breath, he had gone to the back of the bloody mist person. The secret method of killing, blood azura. The bloody mist person narrowed her eyes and chuckled with her hand covering her mouth. With a wave of her sleeve, 8 blood dragons rushed out one after another and bit the huge sword. Chance. Ling Mo, who was hiding in the dark, had cold eyes, but he didn't show any killing intent. He silently grabbed the bloodlight on Su Buwang's chest. He had already seen the key. At this time, Su Buwang, who had been staring at the bloody mist person, suddenly turned his head and showed a bright smile to Ling Mo, who was still invisible. Oh no! Ling Mo's heart skipped a beat. It was too late for him to dodge. Su Buwang slashed backhand, and the long knife light slashed across Ling Mo's body obliquely. A large amount of blood splashed on the face of the bloody mist person Su Li. Ling Mo stared at Su Buwang, staggered back a few steps, and then knelt on the ground. The red blood flowed down along the hideous wound on the chest, and soon dyed the surrounding ground red. The bloody mist person Su Li turned her head, licked the blood on her mouth, and smiled like a flower. So sweet. Chapter 551. Seeing that Ling Mo was in danger, Fang Yuan's pupils shrank. He changed the gesture in his hands. The Milky Way, which had been condensed into a giant sword, immediately separated a part of the river and rolled Ling Mo back quickly. The perfect giant sword immediately showed some flaws. The bloody mist Su Li's eyes flashed. She chuckled and said, "The most precious Milky Way, if it is held by your elders, I may have some trouble. But your cultivation is so weak, haha." She waved her sleeves gently, and 8 blood dragons instantly bit the floors. The original stalemate was immediately reversed. Cracks appeared on the surface of the giant sword. Countless fragments were gnawed down and turned into water again and fell to the ground. Oh no! Fang Yuan's face changed slightly. His hands seemed to be stuck in a swamp, and he couldn't continue the gesture. He gritted his teeth and trembled for a moment. But he saw the bloody mist Su Li waved her sleeves, and 8 blood dragons rushed out instantly and tore the giant sword. "Break, for me!" Boom! The giant sword in the sky exploded instantly, and the most precious Milky Way poured back. Fang Yuan's face was as pale as paper in an instant. Blood flowed from the corners of his mouth, and his hands made the sound of joints cracking. His 10 fingers were all broken. He was defeated. Fang Yuan's hands hung down, and he looked up and stared at the bloody mist figure. The unwillingness and killing intent in his eyes seemed to be able to burn the sky. Being stared at like this, the bloody mist Su Li's face suddenly darkened. She snorted, and the 8 blood dragons immediately turned into 8 blood-colored lightning. In the blink of an eye, 8 blood holes were drilled in Fang Yuan's chest. Wow! Fang Yuan groaned, and his body couldn't support him. He half knelt down, and a mouthful of blood mixed with visceral fragments was sprayed in front of him. The weak should have the consciousness of the weak. The bloody mist Su Li turned her head and touched Su Buwang's cheek. She said softly, "Young man, you are no match for me. If you kneel down and beg for mercy, Maybe I will be in a good mood and keep you as my blood slaves, so that your blood will be sucked dry and your body and soul will be destroyed. Ling Mo was covered with blood. He walked slowly to Fang Yuan with his sword. He stared at the bloody mist Su Li, and his eyes were full of indifference and sarcasm. You don't deserve it. The bloody mist Su Li smiled slightly. Suddenly, another blood-colored light turned into a long whip and whipped Ling Mo. The huge force hit Ling Mo far away. He fell into the dust and directly fainted. Fang Yuan almost bit his lips to bleed. He took a deep breath, and his eyes fell on Su Buwang, Mo, Su Li, Su Bang. As soon as Fang Yuan finished speaking, the same bloody whip shadow came and tore the clothes on the back of Fang Yuan, leaving a hideous crack. Su Fang was Ling Su Mo. Came. Was Kai Momo Su in Mo in Su and said. Time Su Mo Li was Mo Su. Seeing this scene, the bloody mist Su Li snorted and saw Ling Mo, who was in a coma not far away. She said, well, it's boring. Instead of accepting 2 blood slaves, it's better to have a good meal. Go to hell. Fang Yuan was lying on the ground. There was a lot of dust in his eyes, but he still opened his eyes and tried to get up. Everything in front of him became hazy. As the voice of the bloody mist Su Li fell, a cold force entered his body, and his blood was quickly drawn out. The power was disappearing. It was so cold. Is this the end? It shouldn't be like this. I haven't saved Buwang. I haven't found her. How can I die? Suddenly, a pair of feet fell in front of him. The black gauze was fluttering beside him. He tried to see who it was, but it was always chaotic. You disgust me. Su Li's voice was unreasonably calm, but the bloody mist Su Li feeling inexplicably cold. Who are you? What I do has nothing to do with you. Why do you meddle in other people's business? Su Li heard the words and immediately smiled. She smiled very brightly, but the sense of crisis in the heart of the bloody mist Su Li feeling soared. Nothing to do with me. Look again. Is it nothing to do with me? She stepped out, and her face instantly returned to the original appearance of her previous life. But the difference from the previous life was that there was a lotus mark at the corner of her eyes. The face of the bloody mist Su Li feeling changed dramatically. Before the words were spoken, Su Li suddenly disappeared, and then appeared in front of the bloody mist figure. She grabbed both sides of the body of the bloody mist figure and tore it fiercely. Tear. The blood mist figure that had taken human form was instantly torn to shreds like a paper doll. Su Buwang looked at Su Li's face with a confused face and murmured, Mother. Su Li smiled sweetly and pointed at the place between his eyebrows like lightning. The sleeping incantation immediately took effect. Su Buwang's body softened and fell down. My transformation. You ruin my cultivation. Ruin my cultivation. I don't care who you are. Go to hell. The unpleasant scream of the bloody mist resounded through the sky. The chaotic bloody gale suddenly blew up, and a total of 16 blood dragons roared out of the gale. Su Li gently put down Su Buwang, and then threw 2 nimbus to Su Buwang and Ling Mo to protect their lives. After doing this, the blood dragons were less than half a jong behind them. Ha. What daughter of luck? No matter you are a human or a ghost, I will take away your luck today. Daughter of luck. Fang Yuan, who was in a daze, suddenly woke up when he heard this word. He struggled to turn his head to look at the bloody mist. Unfortunately, there were so many double images in front of him that he couldn't see anything clearly. Really? Su Li slightly raised her lips, and her pupils instantly turned into a dark pool. The body of evil ghost. Boom. A strong power suddenly burst out from Su Li's thin body. Before the 16 blood dragons touched Su Li's back, they were all shaken away and returned to their places. The scattered blood mist could not be condensed. Emperor's power? The face in the bloody mist changed wildly, and the killing intent in his eyes was instantly occupied by fear. How is it possible? There can't be an emperor in this world. They are all fake. As soon as the voice fell, the bloody mist figure noticed that it was dark in front of him. Su Li, who was looking after Su Buwang in the distance, came to him and raised her hand to slap him hard. Crack. The bloody mist tumbled, and a humanoid bloody mist figure could be faintly seen being thrown far away. How dare you hurt my people? Who do you think you are? The bloody mist figure was stunned by this slap, and his body was scattered a lot. When he was about to get up, he looked up and saw another slap rapidly enlarging in front of him. How dare you transform into my body as an evil ghost? Hurt my intimacy? The bloody mist figure rolled far away and stood up again. Suddenly, he was horrified to find that only half of his body was left. How is it possible? You are a human clan. How can you hurt me? Su Li narrowed her eyes. Who told me that you are a human clan? The bloody mist figure suddenly thought of something and panicked. You are not an emperor of the human clan. Senior, please forgive me. I have eyes but failed to see, and offended a mighty figure. For the sake of alien clans, please spare my life. Su Li's eyes were playful, and she didn't mean to answer the bloody mist figure at all. She just gently put a drop of blood on her fingertip and shot it into the bloody mist figure's body. I heard that you like to suck blood very much. The crimson blood blended into the bloody mist, and was quickly absorbed by the bloody mist instinctively. The bloody mist figure was stunned at first, and then a sharp pain suddenly came from the bottom of her heart. What did you do to me? Su Li's eyes were indifferent, and she didn't respond. She just turned around, stretched out her hand in the direction of Yun Yi and others, and shook it. Bang! 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 Dozens of blood monsters with a height of 5,000 feet exploded at the same time, like bloody fireworks, bright and dreamy. Yun Yi and others, who were already desperate, stared at this scene in a daze, as if they were in a dream. My Dharma body. The bloody mist figure watched in horror as pieces of black charcoal fell from her body. She just absorbed a drop of Su Li's blood. How could this happen? Even the most violent blood poison she had ever seen could not destroy her body. But now, it had been so easily destroyed. Your Holiness, I am useful. I am from an ancient lost clan, and I know many secrets. Later, I was accepted as a spiritual body by the opposing blood bead. I know the inheritance of the opposing blood emperor. Save me. Before the bloody mist figure finished its words, it screamed, and its charcoal speed suddenly accelerated. In the blink of an eye, it turned into a pool of black charcoal marks. Save you. If you hurt them, you will only have one ending. Unfortunately, you didn't hear it. After Su Li said a few words to the bloody mist figure that had turned into charcoal, she retracted her gaze and walked to Su Buwang. A bead suddenly flew out of his chest, and the wound healed in the blink of an eye. Su Li pinched the warm bead with 2 fingers, and a thought flashed through her eyes. It is really the bead I got from Lin Yanxing. In the reincarnation mirror, I finally abandoned everything, and this bead was also inherited by Buwang. It has been in my body all the time. The opposing blood bead seems to be the inheritance of the opposing blood emperor. Although my current strength is still some distance away from that of the opposing blood emperor, it is not far. This thing is useless, but it is a lucky chance for Buwang. But before that, I need to check the opposing blood bead to prevent it from hurting Buwang. Su Li put away the bead, and Buwang checked it again. After confirming that there was no serious problem, she put it into an exquisite wing room in Kang Lei's cave. After doing this, Su Li turned around, and her face had returned to the appearance of this life. Then she waved her hand, and the 2 people lying on the ground, half dead, suddenly floated up and followed her. The bloody mist figure is a little more powerful than the Grand Elder I killed in Han sect. No wonder Ling Mo and others are restrained everywhere. But now, the bloody realm can be dispersed. Su Li narrowed her eyes, and the fragments of the small world emerged behind her. With my current strength, I don't need the fragments of the small world. Let them do their last work. As Su Li's voice fell, countless fragments of the small world with colorful luster rose into the air and hit the bloody sky. Rumble, what's that sound? As soon as Yun Yi heard the roar, someone suddenly pointed to the sky and exclaimed, "Look! The sky is cracked." Yun Yi and others looked up and saw a crack in the dark red sky, and the crack was still expanding at a very fast speed. The bloody realm is broken. Yun Yi was overjoyed, Fang Yuan and others succeeded. At the same time, other small bloody realms in Ju City also showed signs of breaking. Everyone was surprised. They won the final battle after all. Fang Yuan's body floated in the air. Although his body was no longer uncomfortable, he was still weak and powerless. But he still struggled and forcibly turned his head, trying to see the face of the woman beside him. Su Li. Chapter 552. 34 Chinese Network. In 1 second wonderful pop-up window free reading. Fang Yuan didn't see Su Li's face clearly and fainted. The long darkness didn't make him think much. It seemed that someone specially cast a tranquilizing spell and let him have a good sleep. When he woke up again, he was in a wing room. As soon as he opened his eyes, Fang Yuan heard Su Buwang's excited shout. Wake up, Uncle Fang wakes up. There was a sound of footsteps outside the door immediately, and then a gray-haired medical practitioner felt his pulse. How is it? Su Qingtan and others asked with concern. The old man moved his palm away in surprise and replied, It's weird. When Lord Fang Kun came back, he was obviously seriously injured. Not only his internal organs were damaged, but even his pubic region was cracked. I thought that Lord Fang Kun would be in a coma for at least half a year. I didn't expect that he woke up in 3 days, and 90% of his internal injuries were healed. It's really a miracle. Su Buwang was overjoyed when he heard the words, That's good. No matter if he is weird or not, Uncle Fang is blessed by heaven. Su Qingtan thought for a moment and said with a smile, What Wang said is right. It's good that he is well. Thank you, Mr. Bai. Lord Qing, you flatter me. I'll go to see Lord Zui again. Su Qingtan glanced at Su Buwang with a faint smile and said, I'll go with you. In the blink of an eye, there were only Su Buwang and Fang Yuan in the room. Fang Yuan looked at Su Buwang quietly. Feeling the tolerance in his eyes, Su Buwang immediately lowered his head and looked ashamed. He stammered, Uncle Fang, although he couldn't remember clearly after the appearance of the Bloody Mist Man, the memory before condensing the Bloody Mist was clearly imprinted in his mind. He actually fought with Uncle Fang, and he almost killed Uncle Fang with his own hand. And Uncle Ling Mo was also seriously injured. In the past few days, he stayed at Fang Yuan's bedside in fear. He didn't even dare to sleep. His mind was full of random thoughts. Fortunately, things didn't go bad. Fang Yuan showed a gentle smile and said, I don't blame you. You are just controlled by the master of the bloody world and you can't control yourself. Don't blame yourself. Su Buwang's body trembled slightly, and the stone in his heart finally fell off. He scratched his head and smiled, I knew it. That's a trick of the blood realm, but why did it have to be me? Uncle Fang, I really can't figure it out. Also, those strange memories, they should all be fake. My mother is a maidservant. How could she have become a Holy Spirit blood in the reincarnation mirror? No. Fang Yuan shook his head calmly and said with certainty and decisiveness, Your mother is Su Li, the owner of Reincarnation Mirror. Su Buwang suddenly widened his eyes and stopped breathing. The extreme negative energy zone was filled with swamps. Su Li sat in the nothingness, holding the opposing blood bead in her hand, and her body glowed with faint soul light. Occasionally, some ghosts were attracted, but they would be caught by the little girl, Hong Baizhu, and put into the Black Lotus ring instantly. After a while, Su Li opened her eyes, and the shimmer on her body slowly faded. After solving the problem of the blood realm, she came here to continue to collect ghosts. In addition to feeding Su Bai, it was inevitable that she would trigger nature's punishment when she fought against the holy sects in the future. Naturally, the more ghosts, the better. However, the strength of the ghosts in the extreme negative energy swamp was limited. Unless there were some powerful ghosts, Hong Baizhu would take care of the rest. Su Li used the saved time to study the opposing blood bead. It only took her 2 or 3 days to study it thoroughly. This thing has been activated. You can carry it with you. It can improve your physical body, consolidate your foundation, and even awaken some talents. It's a good treasure. But the opposing Blood Emperor died a long time ago, and the inherited practice method left by him is incomplete and of little value. Su Li frowned. Su Li erased the incomplete practice method, and then called, Black Lotus. Wow! Black Lotus reluctantly got out of the ring. Master, what can I do for you? Don't play dumb. Su Li threw the opposing blood bead. You know what to do. Black Lotus pursed his lips and almost cried. For tens of thousands of years, he managed to scrape and steal so many practice methods. How could he just hand them over? Master, don't talk about conditions with me. Since you recognize me as your master, Wang is your little master. If you don't take out a sect inheritance, it will be too degrading. Inheritance of a sect? Black Lotus stared at her with grief and indignation. Little Su Li, do you think that every treasure can bear the inheritance of a sect like me? This bead is just an imitation of the opposing blood bead. It's the limit to put the holy inheritance in it. If it is improved further, the bead will be destroyed. Su Li slightly raised her eyebrows and listened carefully. Black Lotus suddenly felt that he had regained some of his dignity. Then he shook his head and said, even if it's a holy inheritance, it will be lost if it is put in this bead for a long time. I have never heard of the opposing blood emperor. Since ancient times, the strong have their names. How can the title be determined by the treasure? This person must not be a powerful person. Lord Black Lotus, you know a lot. Su Li said faintly and looked at Black Lotus with a faint smile. Black Lotus suddenly woke up with a shiver and realized that he had spilled the beans. With cold sweat on his forehead, he hurriedly said, You flatter me. My knowledge is not as good as yours. Well, since you don't want to talk about the past, I won't force you. Prepare a holy inheritance as soon as possible. Even if it is an imitation of the opposing blood bead, it is better than nothing. Su Li waved her hand. Black Lotus smiled bitterly and returned to the Black Lotus ring with the opposing blood bead. Then he slapped himself in the face. Shut your mouth. Shut your mouth. Ha 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 ha. The reincarnation beast came out of the darkness with a smile. After so many years, you still have the bad habit of showing off. You really haven't made any progress, unlike me. Black Lotus's eyes twitched and he sneered, unlike you, a stupid donkey. You have lived for so many years but still fell into the trap of the human clan and ended up with your body broken. Compared with you, I am much smarter. You. The reincarnation beast was poked in its sore spot. With anger flashing in its eyes, it rushed to Black Lotus and bit him. Damn it, stupid donkey, I have given you face, haven't I? Eat my foot. No. The two spirits fought like street gangsters in the ring space, which was so childish that people couldn't bear to look at it. Su Li withdrew her gaze and couldn't help laughing. Black Lotus always thought that she couldn't see the scene in the ring space, but Black Lotus hid it, so she naturally couldn't completely confess her trump card. After messing around for a while, Black Lotus quickly found a suitable holy inheritance, integrated it into the opposing blood bead, and handed it to Su Li. This inheritance is called Chen Lian. Although it is not an inheritance of a school, it is also a top one among the holy inheritances. Many disciples of a school practiced it in those days. This method is all-encompassing. You can practice both Dharma and body, and you can draw stars to refine your body. The only defect is that it needs a lot of pneuma and blood to support it. However, with the help of the imitation opposing blood bead, there is no defect. It can be said that they complement each other. It is the most suitable for you to practice. Su Li nodded with satisfaction and suddenly asked, Black Lotus, what is the real opposing blood bead like? What is its ranking among the most precious treasures? Black Lotus was silent for a moment and sighed, anyway, it is not a secret. It is okay to tell you. The opposing blood bead ranks 8th, and it can control all the blood in the world. It was also extremely terrible in ancient times. It was the most precious treasure of the evil circle. Speaking of this, Black Lotus changed his tone. These treasures have been destroyed except for me. Only the imitation is left, which is not very useful. Su Li smiled slightly. In this way, your ranking is at least above the 8th. But I don't see anything special about you except that you can hoard goods. Black Lotus suddenly sweated on his forehead and said embarrassedly, I have survived from the catastrophe, but I have lost a lot of things. I am not as brave as in the past. Really? Su Li asked meaningfully. Black Lotus suddenly felt stressed. When he was racking his brains to think about how to explain, Su Li changed the topic and said, "What about the treasure in Fang Yuan's body?" Black Lotus was relieved and quickly replied, "Tianhe sect originally didn't have the most precious treasure. Its ancestor gathered the power of the whole sect 8,000 years ago to refine this treasure. It is called Tianhe. Although it is a little mysterious and its grade has reached my level, it has not been precipitated for a short time after all. Its spiritual wisdom is not developed. If you take it seriously, it is not the most precious treasure. The real precious treasure doesn't need to be controlled. Just like me, as long as you tell me. Well, I will go back. You keep the girl and continue to catch ghosts. Don't eat too much. If the quantity is less, I will hold you responsible." Su Li waved her hand to interrupt Black Lotus and went away in a flash. It is more and more difficult to fool this girl. Black Lotus wiped his cold sweat and looked at Hong Baizhu with sparkling eyes. The little girl immediately stepped back in fear, but her little face was very stubborn. She pouted and said, "I won't let you eat too much." Hong Baizhu caught 2036 ghosts. I remember it very clearly. Black Lotus's face suddenly darkened. How long had it been? The little girl became as stingy as that girl. In the Jew city, there was a jubilant atmosphere everywhere. Even the violent conflicts were much less. The three forces even held a banquet together to celebrate the disappearance of the blood circle. The banquet was set in the largest Linli building in the Jew city. The banquet extended from the restaurant to the surrounding streets. The whole city celebrated together and no one was refused. How generous they are. Su Li walked to the door of the banquet and chuckled. Of course, the Linli building is the first force in the Jew city. It is rich and overbearing. This banquet is held to show the demeanor of a big sect for the great victory in the blood circle. Su Li turned her head and saw a young practitioner in a purple gold robe looking at her. Although Su Li covered her face with a veil, her beauty made the young practitioner's eyes brighten. He was shocked by her beauty. At the same time, he was also cautious. Such a beautiful female practitioner walked alone in the Jew city. What did it mean? He was not a good-for-nothing who only thought about beauty. The great victory in the blood circle? I am a casual practitioner named Qingshui. I am new here. Can you explain it to me? I don't quite understand. Su Li saw the vigilance in his eyes and asked softly. The young practitioner in the purple robe suddenly laughed. I am Dan Zhonghe from the Liang Villa. It is my honor to answer your doubts. Then, Dan Zhonghe told her about the situation in the Jew city. It was not a secret in the three forces. So, there was no need to hide it. I heard that the reason why we can turn the situation around in the Jew city this time is that the Linli building newly joined a peerless senior named Fang Kun. Without his help, I don't know how many years the blood circle will be harmed. Dan Zhonghe sighed with emotion. He inadvertently glanced at the center of the street, and his eyes brightened immediately. Look, that is Lord Shuo of the Linli building. The senior of the Linli building has arrived. Chapter 553. 1 second to remember. Wonderful pop-up window free reading. Su Li followed Dan Zhonghe's gaze and saw a dozen figures wearing various masks passing through the empty road in front of them. The leader was Su Qinghao wearing a cyan fox mask. They didn't stop and soon disappeared into the gate of the Linli building. Su Li clearly saw a tall and straight figure wearing a square pure white mask. Even if she couldn't see through the mask, she could recognize that it was Fang Yuan. It seems that there is a good tactical matrix master in the Linli building. He acts very fast. Su Li stared at the new mask on Fang Yuan's face thoughtfully. Dan Zhonghe withdrew his gaze and couldn't help but sigh. It's a pity that although I have a good identity in the Raging Sun Villa, I am not qualified to enter the main building. I heard that the seniors of the Linli building don't wear masks in the Linli building. Except for their own people, Only the top leaders of the Raging Sun Villa and the Soul Death Valley know their true faces. Su Li nodded slightly and said, "Thank you for your explanation. I have gained a lot today." When Dan Zhonghe heard such a soft voice, he couldn't help but feel a little excited. He blushed and said with a smile, "It's just a small favor. It's not worth mentioning. Miss Qingshui, although I can't enter the main building, I have a small status in the Raging Sun Villa. I got 2 seat cards A. I can get close to the sages and mighty seniors. A single word from the almighty figures might be able to give us a sudden flash of insight, allowing our cultivation to advance by leaps and bounds. This is a rare opportunity. Now I have 1 more seat card. Would you like to go with me?" After Dan Zhonghe finished speaking, even he himself was very satisfied. It was reasonable, neither servile nor overbearing, and he didn't express any improper thoughts. He thought that the other party wouldn't refuse. Su Li smiled and was about to speak. Suddenly, a voice full of anger came in. "Dan Zhonghe." Dan Zhonghe's expression changed slightly. He turned around and was about to leave. But a hand grabbed his back and he couldn't take a step. Su Li's eyes fell on the petite woman with a childish face behind her. She looked slightly strange. It seemed that Dan Zhonghe was a heartless man. Was she accidentally misunderstood? The voice of the petite woman was not low, and it soon attracted the attention of the surrounding practitioners. After a while, the surroundings were filled with people watching the fun. As the saying goes, 3 women make a play. The play of 2 women and a man seems to be even more exciting. "Junior Sister Yuan, why are you here?" Dan Zhonghe's tone was slightly panicked. His eyes flickered as if he had been caught stealing food. Her reaction further confirmed the thoughts of the people around her, and the way they looked at Su Li became subtle. "You still have the cheek to ask me?" The delicate woman was so angry that her pretty face turned pale. Seeing the 2 seat cards in his hands, her chest violently heaved up and down. Tears welled up in the corners of her eyes. "If I wasn't here, would you have gone to meet this fox spirit? I got the seat card from my father for you, but you actually turned around and went out with this vixen." Only then did Dan Zhonghe realize that he was holding the seat token in his hand. He quickly put it away and swallowed his saliva. "No, junior sister, listen to me, this lady and I met by chance, but..." The pretty woman sneered and interrupted him. "I heard everything you said when you invited her to sit with you. You still want to quibble? Could it be that a nascent soul stage cultivator like me would have a problem with my ears?" Dan Zhonghe was speechless at once. Seeing this, the pretty woman couldn't help but feel more desperate, and her expression became completely cold. "Dan Zhonghe, you are very good. I, Yuan Ying, have been blind all my life to fall in love with a person like you." The pretty woman gnashed her teeth. Suddenly, she turned her head and stared at Su Li with hatred. "It turns out that you like this kind of woman. How can this vixen compare with..." She wanted to question the reason of Dan Zhonghe, but suddenly found that the woman in front of her was really better than her in terms of figure and temperament. Although her appearance was covered, it could be seen from her eyes and eyebrows that she must be amazingly beautiful. She was far inferior to her. Yuan Ying was so angry that her chest suddenly hurt, and even her vision was a little black. A kind of hatred suddenly broke through her reason, so that she didn't consider the consequences at all, and stabbed the flying sword angrily. "Bitch, I will teach you a good lesson." Dan Zhonghe suddenly turned pale with fright, and hurriedly shouted, "Junior sister apprentice, don't." But he didn't mean to stop her. What was the occasion today? It was a celebration banquet held by the Leanly building. No matter what kind of grievances there were, private fights were prohibited here. Junior sister apprentice directly attacked him, which not only disgraced the Leanly building, but also disgraced the practitioners in the whole Ju city. She really made a big trouble. How dare he get involved in the trouble? It was better to be wise to protect himself. Anyway, after this misunderstanding, Yuan Ying would not be his cultivation companion. The loss outweighed the gain. While Dan Zhonghe was calculating in his heart, the people around also reacted. In an instant, everyone stepped back for fear of being involved in the trouble. A female practitioner who has lost her mind is really terrible. She completely disregards the consequences. Someone in the crowd sighed and said sarcastically, I know her. She is the only daughter of the fourth elder of the Liang villa. This sword will hurt the fourth elder badly. Ding. Su Li casually tilted her head and easily dodged the flying sword. Yuan Ying's pretty face changed, and she was about to control the flying sword to change direction. But Su Li smiled. She didn't move, but the flying sword was caught by two white and soft fingers, and couldn't move. You even have a higher cultivation than me. Yuan Ying was shocked, and her little face instantly turned pale. She had been cherished by her father since she was a child. She was arrogant. Among the young female practitioners in Jucheng, even if her cultivation was not at the top, it was extremely high. But now it was easily controlled by a female practitioner who she had never seen before. Little girl. Su Li's tone was leisurely, without any anger. Her bearing alone made Yuan Ying feel that she had lost again. I'll give you a word of advice. You should be careful when choosing a Dao companion, and don't choose one from a pile of trash. Instead of flying into a rage out of humiliation, why don't you teach some treacherous men a good lesson, just like this? Yuan Ying was slightly stunned. Then she heard Dan Zhonghe, who was watching from the sidelines, suddenly scream, and there was blood between his legs. Hiss. Seeing this, all the male practitioners gasped and stepped back a few more steps at the same time. Breaking a man's leg easily. What a ruthless female practitioner. Looking at Dan Zhonghe's bloody lower body, Yuan Ying was instantly stunned. Why was the development of the situation different from what she had imagined? Sister, are you also deceived by him? Her eyes suddenly brightened, and the original hostility suddenly disappeared. Su Li chuckled and shook her head. Sister, I'm new here, and I just met Child Dan today. What? Yuan Ying's eyes widened. Did she really misunderstand? However, you didn't misunderstand him. There are at least 5 different numas of yin yuan in his body, so, Su Li covered her mouth and whispered, I castrated him for you. 5 numas of yin? Yuan Ying's body trembled as she listened. So the one she liked was this kind of trash. How dare you? Her eyes were slightly red. She tremblingly pulled out the flying sword from Su Li's hand, and immediately stabbed at Dan Zhonghe with the sword. I'll kill you. Puff. Dan Zhonghe didn't expect that Yuan Ying would suddenly attack him. The sword pierced through his pubic region. He stared blankly at the flying sword inserted into his body. A sense of weakness soon overwhelmed him. His pubic region collapsed, and he died. He's dead. Yuan Ying came to her senses and realized that she had made a big trouble. She was not afraid of killing people, and Dan Zhonghe's background was not as good as hers. But the trouble was, they were at the gate of the Linli building. He's dead. Go and inform the Linli building. Yuan Ying really made a big trouble this time. Yuan Ying's face was pale, and she didn't even have the strength to escape. Her home was in Ju City. Where could she escape to? Suddenly, she remembered something and transmitted the sound to Su Li. Sister, run away. You just came to Ju City, and the people of the Linli building certainly don't know you. If you run away, I'll be the only one to die. It's not a loss. Su Li was slightly stunned, and then she couldn't help laughing. This girl seemed to have a strange way of thinking. Seeing that Su Li laughed, Yuan Ying thought that Su Li didn't believe it. She immediately became anxious. Sister, I'm serious. You are not from Ju City, and you don't know how terrible the Linli building is. Who dares to kill people at the banquet? How dare you? All of a sudden, a loud roar came from afar and rapidly approached them. Yuan Ying held her breath slightly, and she was so nervous that her whole body collapsed. Suddenly, a warm hand patted her on the back. Yuan Ying looked back blankly and saw Su Li's warm eyes. Somehow, she calmed down a lot. Soon, a practitioner of the Linli building walked over with a majestic gait. When he saw Dan Zhongping lying in a pool of blood, he suddenly stopped and looked up at the crowd sharply. Who did it? Everyone turned their eyes to the 2 girls standing in the field. When the practitioner of the Linli building saw Su Li and Yuan Ying, he couldn't help but be stunned. Then he returned to normal quickly and said sternly, "Today, the Leanly building forbids fighting at the banquet. Anyone who violates it will be killed. Do you know your crime? Death without mercy." Yuan Ying was shocked, and her mind was blank. For a moment, she didn't know how to respond. "Ho ho," a soft chuckle came from the black veil, "you are not my opponent. Let the leader of the Leanly building come out. It's easy to deal with this matter." As soon as the words came out, everyone was silent. The practitioner of the Leanly building was stunned for a moment and said in astonishment, What did you say?" At this moment, in the lobby of the Leanly building, the senior leaders of the three forces gathered together, which was very lively. And the protagonist of this banquet was undoubtedly Fang Yuan. Senior Fang Kun helped us out of righteousness this time. He should be respected by all of us. Absolutely. Absolutely. Lord Fang Kun, I propose a toast to you. After a round of toasts, Fang Yuan absent-mindedly put down the wine cup. In the past few days, he had been thinking about the words of the bloody mist when he was in a daze. The hazy picture also flashed back again and again. Is the daughter of luck her? Or, there was only one daughter of luck in the world. If there was a new daughter of luck, it meant that Su Li was really gone. But that figure. If it was not her, why did she save us? Fang Yuan was extremely contradictory. He carefully inquired about the process, but only got the news that he, Ling Mo, and Bu Wang inexplicably appeared in front of the headquarters of the Leanly building. As for who saved them and sent them back, no one saw it. As his thoughts were entangled, the wine cup was empty unconsciously. When Fang Yuan was about to pour another cup, he saw a manservant of the Leanly building rushing in and said in a panic, "Lord Zhuo, someone is making trouble at the door. Steward Lin is no match and was caught." Chapter 554. Male. What? Hearing the manservant's words, everyone present was stunned and even didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Now the Leanly building was at its peak. How dare someone make trouble at the gate of the Leanly building? Did he want to die? Please enjoy. I'll go out and have a look. Su Qinghao got up and put on the mask in his arms. Then he flashed out of the lobby. The lobby became lively again. No one took the disturbance outside seriously. But after half an hour, Su Qingtan finally noticed that something was wrong. He frowned and went out of the courtyard without saying a word. Fang Yuan was a little upset. Seeing Su Qingtan go out, he also got up. At the same time, he transmitted the sound to Ling Mo, who was about to get up, come to preside over the situation. I'll go out and have a look. By the way, I can get some fresh air. Ling Mo sat down again. He glanced at Su Buwang, who was eating and drinking at the opposite table and didn't care about the situation. Ling Mo shook his head slightly. After today, Ling Mo had to discipline this guy. Otherwise, if he went out with the identity of the young lord, he would not only lose the face of the Leanly building, but also his mother. When Su Qingtan went out of the Leanly building, he felt that the atmosphere was a little strange. The seats outside were dead silent. After he came out, everyone's eyes fell on him. It's Lord Qing. This time, Lord Qing took action. The demon girl should be arrogant to the extreme. Hearing the whispers, Su Qingtan's heart sank slightly. Something happened to Qinghao? What's the matter? Fang Yuan also frowned when he saw the scene. Su Qingtan shook his head and pointed to one of the banquets. Let's go and have a look. When they started, all the practitioners immediately made way for them, pointing to the center of the street in front of the Leanly building. This is the first-class seat. What is Qinghao doing? Su Qingtan was more and more puzzled. When he got closer, he finally saw a strange and harmonious scene. There were only 4 people sitting in this seat, 2 men and 2 women. One of them was Su Qinghao. Eat, you 3. How can you waste the delicious food? Today is the time for eating. It's not worth it to be delayed by my affairs. During the dinner, the woman with a black veil on her face smiled sweetly. She picked up the chopsticks and put a dish in Su Qinghao's bowl. Su Qinghao felt humiliated, shocked and angry. He couldn't move and could only watch Su Li's movements. Not long after he came out, he learned of the details. Today, someone killed a woman in the street in front of the Linley building. But when he followed the manservant to the table, he saw that Steward Lin and the woman were sitting at the same table. When he was about to scold him, he found that he couldn't control his body and also sat at the table. How is this possible? Even though my cultivation level is lower than Big Brother's, I'm still a deity transformation cultivator, yet I'm so easily restrained. I can't even notify Big Brother and the others. After a while, he saw Su Qingtan and Fang Yuan coming together, and he couldn't help but feel happy. Great. Got it. Big Brother and Big Brother Fang came together. Big Brother Fang was able to destroy the blood world. No matter how demonic this woman is, she is definitely not a match for Big Brother Fang. Yuan Ying saw Fang Yuan's mask and recognized his identity. She suddenly felt bitter in her heart. In the end, he still couldn't escape death. Su Qingtan quickly saw the clue and said in a cold voice, "Your Excellency, this time, did you?" Before Su Qingtan finished his words, he was interrupted by Su Li, "Fellow practitioner Fang, I haven't seen you for a long time. I didn't expect that I should call you Lord Fang Kun when I see you again." Su Li put down the chopsticks, looked at Fang Yuan, and chuckled. Su Qingtan suddenly paused and turned to transmit the sound in silence. "Do you know each other?" Fang Yuan nodded slightly. Before Su Qingtan transmitted the sound in silence again, he was silent for a moment and said, "Is it? We meet again. Fellow practitioner Fang, why don't you invite me to have a seat inside? Could it be that fellow Daoist thinks that a table of first-class banquets can beat me?" Su Li interrupted Fang Yuan's question and glanced at Su Qinghao and Su Qingtan. Su Qinghao suddenly relaxed and the invisible inhibition faded away. He quickly jumped behind Su Qingtan. "Big Brother Fang, this woman's means are evil, and her purpose is unknown. Be careful." As soon as Su Qinghao transmitted the sound in silence, he saw Fang Yuan nodded and said, "I really neglected you. How about having a talk on the top floor?" As soon as the words came out, everyone was shocked on the spot. Yuan Ying was even more dumbfounded. She didn't expect that there would be such a turn of events. Lord Fang Kun came over and didn't denounce her. Instead, he invited this sister to the top floor of the Linley building. What was her background? "Fang Yuan, you know better than anyone else what the top floor is like. How can you take a girl of unknown origin up there?" Su Qingtan also felt that it was inappropriate and transmitted the sound in silence in a hurry. But Fang Yuan turned a deaf ear. Su Li's eyes flashed and she said softly, "My pleasure." Then, she got up and walked to Fang Yuan. "I didn't mean to offend you today. There is a reason for it. Don't embarrass the sister." "I see." Fang Yuan nodded slightly. Even though Su Qinghao and Su Qingtan had thousands of doubts in their hearts, they had to keep silent. Since the words had been spoken, it was hard to take them back. It was inappropriate for him to say no. The so-called rules only restricted the weak. Obviously, this woman was not weak. It was just a small matter to compensate the Liang villa. "Please." Fang Yuan turned sideways and gestured with his hand. Su Li bowed slightly to express her gratitude. Then they stepped into the gate of the Linley building. All the people in the lobby saw that Fang Yuan and others came back with a strange woman. The lively atmosphere suddenly became quiet. Su Buwang, who was still eating and drinking, felt something was wrong. He looked up and saw Su Li. His eyes suddenly brightened. He stood up and shouted, "Sister Qingshui." Hearing this name, Su Qingtan and Su Qinghao were slightly shocked. It turned out that she was Qingshui who saved Su Buwang in the blood tide. No wonder Fang Yuan's attitude towards her was so subtle. Even if she saved Buwang's life, she shouldn't go to the top floor. Su Qingtan couldn't figure it out. Su Buwang had already pulled Su Li to take a seat and said, "Sister Qingshui, where have you been these days? I thought you had left the Yin-Yang region." Su Li glanced at Fang Yuan, who took off his mask and was expressionless. She smiled sweetly and said, "I went to deal with some private affairs. I haven't finished them yet. I thought of your safety halfway, so I came back to have a look. Su Buwang was stunned and moved in his heart. No one had ever cared about him so blatantly. For a moment, he felt a little uncomfortable. He blushed and whispered, "Sister, I will be embarrassed if you say so." Su Li smiled and said nothing. She looked at other young people sitting at the table. Seeing her glance, everyone showed respect and nodded slightly. Although Su Buwang was still sitting on the side, they had already been hinted that this seemingly unreliable young man was the future owner of the Linli building, and they were the trusted subordinates selected by Ling Mo and others to follow Su Buwang. They naturally had to respect those whom Su Buwang respected. With Su Li's wisdom and experience, she could see the details of these young practitioners at a glance. She couldn't help but squint and praise, "You are all a group of good children. I propose a toast to you. Take good care of my brother Buwang in the future." As she said, Su Li picked up the wine cup and drank it up. Everyone was slightly shocked when they heard the words. They hurriedly stood up and also picked up the wine cup and drank it up. "Senior, you don't have to do this. We will do our best." Senior, bottoms up. After one round, the atmosphere at the table immediately became harmonious. Su Buwang scratched his head. Although he didn't understand why this sister Qingshui was so kind to him, the feeling of being cared for by the elders still made him feel warm in his heart. Although Fang Yuan sat in the main seat, his attention was always on the side seats. Seeing this scene, he sighed secretly. After all, men were not as meticulous as women. He never thought of helping Su Buwang to get familiar with the confidants. At this moment, Qiu Ruhai, the owner of the Liang Villa in the main seat, picked up the wine cup and said with a smile, "Lord Fang Kun, I'm curious. May I ask you the origin of the woman who came in just now? Didn't you say that something happened at the door just now?" Fang Yuan raised his eyes and looked at Qiu Ruhai. His indifferent eyes immediately made the latter feel cold. "Ha ha," Su Qingtan smoothed things over and took over the topic. "Fang Kun is indifferent in nature and not good at talking. Let me answer your question. Speaking of this, it has something to do with the Lord." Speaking of this, Su Qingtan transmitted the sound in silence. No one knew what he said, but Qiu Ruhai's face suddenly changed. Then he closed his mouth and no longer talked about the accident. The banquet lasted for a long time, and it didn't end after half a day. Every minute and every second was suffering for Fang Yuan, who wanted to know the answer. But for Su Buwang, it was an extremely pleasant chat time. During the banquet, he roughly told his encounter in the blood world. He didn't hide anything from the kind sister who saved his life several times. "So, you got the memory about mother and then became the young lord of the Linli building? This is truly worthy of celebration." Su Li raised her eyebrows slightly and transmitted the sound in silence with a faint smile. "Oh, Sister Qingshui, don't laugh at me." Su Buwang looked distressed and complained, "I don't know whether those memories are true or not and whether Uncle Fang is lying to me again. And with my cultivation, how can I be the young lord? Those young lords of the big forces all have deep foundations and are invincible at the same level. I'm not afraid to laugh at you. In the past 1,000 years, I have no trump card except cultivation. Uncle Fang's background is also sensitive. I don't know any of the skills he knows." Su Li listened and laughed. She continued to transmit the sound in silence. "If you are worried about this, I can teach you. I promise that you will not be worse than any talent." Su Buwang only thought that Su Li was joking and waved his hand. "Sister, don't tease me. Besides, even if I can be the young lord, I don't want to." "Then why?" Su Li's words were always with a gentle smile, which made Su Buwang unconsciously relaxed. He said all the words in his heart to Su Li without missing a word. "Those memories, whether they are true or false." Su Buwang looked serious and looked at Su Li. "I don't want to be tied here by an identity. I want to go to Jojo region and have a look." Chapter 555. Su Li was slightly stunned. After thinking for a while, she replied with a chuckle, Silly brother, can't you be the young lord and go to Jojo region? If you are the young lord of the Leanly building, you will have enough resources. If they ask you to stay in Ju City, can't you run away? In this way, you will have the resources for practice and your wish can be realized. Isn't it a win-win situation? Su Buwang was stunned. Was there such an operation? Then he thought about it. What Sister Qingshui said was unconventional, but it seemed that there was a lot of room for operation. Su Li stopped talking and held the wine cup to taste carefully. Her eyes were always on Su Buwang. She couldn't get enough of him. After a whole day, the banquet of the Leanly building came to an end. Fellow practitioner Qing, I will give you an explanation for Dan Zhonghe's matter today. I'm leaving now. Qiu Ruhai slightly cupped his hands, and Su Qingtan smiled back. This was the confidence of the first force in Ju City. Regardless of the specific matter today, he only needed to tell Qiu Ruhai that the source of the trouble was the people of the Raging Sun Villa. After the head of the Raging Sun Villa and the people of the Suihun Valley bid farewell to each other, the practitioners outside almost dispersed, leaving only some manservants of the Leanly building to clean up the mess. Fang Yuan turned his head and stared at Su Li, who was still sitting next to Su Buwang. Sensing his gaze, Su Li tilted her head and smiled. Fellow practitioner Fang, please lead the way. After a while, Su Li pushed open the door of the top floor of the Leanly building and walked in. Su Buwang, Fang Yuan, Ling Mo, Su Qingtan and others followed her. It seems that no one has been here for a long time, although it is very clean. Su Li's fingertips swept across the tea table beside the table. She twisted it and found no dust. Fang Yuan vaguely observed Su Li's every work and said calmly, "This room is specially prepared for distinguished guests. Few distinguished guests come to the Leanly building, so we don't use it much." Su Li was stunned and couldn't help laughing. How can I be a distinguished guest? Fellow practitioner Fang is so polite. Then she glanced at the others and continued, not only fellow practitioner Fang, but also the fellow practitioners of the Leanly building are so enthusiastic. I'm really flattered that so many people come here. Hearing this, Su Qingtan suddenly laughed and said, "We are just curious. Fang Kun has never been close to women. What kind of person can make Fang Kun treat her like this? Then I'm afraid I'll have to disappoint fellow Daoist Qing. I'm just an ordinary rogue cultivator. I've never given my life to any power." Su Li's understatement made Fang Yuan frown slightly. He was well aware of this woman's strength. It was hard to believe that she was a rogue cultivator. After a while, everyone sat down at the same time. Fang Yuan intentionally or unintentionally vacated Su Li's favorite seat. Su Li's eyes flashed vaguely. She didn't look at the empty seat and sat in the guest seat next to Fang Yuan. After the maid served the spiritual tea, the room was silent for a moment. Fang Yuan suddenly spoke and broke the silence. "You were the one who killed the blood mist man from the blood world?" Everyone was shocked by his words. Su Li curled her lips and looked at Fang Yuan's complicated eyes. She said faintly, "So what? It's not me." "So what?" Fang Yuan held his breath slightly. He subconsciously recalled the shout of the blood mist man in a daze. The daughter of luck. His eyes were unprecedentedly tangled. The daughter of luck only existed in the world. If the latter was alive, the former must be dead. Was it, you or not? There was only a difference of one word between yes and no, but it was related to the last hope in his heart. After a few suffocating breaths, Fang Yuan relaxed his tense body and slowly said in a low voice, "If it was you, the Leanly building would try our best to satisfy your request in Jueching to repay your great kindness. If it was not you, I would not embarrass you even if I thought too much. I just ask you to give me an answer." After he said this, the room fell into silence again. Su Li picked up the teacup and took a sip of tea. She slowly glanced at the people present. Ling Mo, the eldest brother, the fourth brother, Yun Yi and others, plus Fang Yuan, were all the seniors of the Leanly building now. She had known a lot of secrets from Su Buwang. Who was the mysterious person who urged Ling Mo to rebuild the Leanly building? However, she couldn't ask this question. If she asked with the same purpose as Fang Yuan, It would inevitably make everyone doubt her identity. However, there was no danger of exposing other questions. I heard that there is a Lord Luo in the Linli building. Why haven't I seen him? Su Li didn't answer but asked. Luo? Fang Yuan was puzzled. He moved his eyes away and fell on Ling Mo. Ling Mo's eyes flashed and he admitted, there is indeed a Lord Luo in the Linli building. You just came here. How do you know? I just inquired about it casually. The names of the seniors of your sect are not secrets, are they? What you said is right. Su Qingtan stopped Ling Mo, who frowned and said in a calm tone, Luo is just an honorary protector of the Linli building. After he was seriously injured in the bloody world, he woke up and left. We don't know his specific whereabouts. Su Li slightly raised her eyebrows and said, I see. No wonder she didn't see a similar person in the final battle of the bloody world. Was it Luo Ichen who left with my Ruahan? What you want to know, I have told you truthfully with full sincerity. Su Qingtan continued with a hint of coercion in his eyes. What's your answer? Do you want my answer? Su Li smiled meaningfully. It's very simple. I want an honorary protector position, just like Luo. I will tell you what you want to know. Fang Yuan looked at Su Li and was slightly stunned. What the woman said in the inn turned out to be true. She wanted to join the Linli building. Sister, will you also join the Linli building? That's great. Su Buwang's eyes suddenly brightened. Seeing that Ling Mo and others were still hesitating, he became serious and snorted, Don't you want me to be the young lord? If you are here, I can promise you. If you are not here, I don't want to be the young lord. As soon as he said that, everyone couldn't help but be silent. Even Fang Yuan faintly felt sad. When did this silly boy and Qing Shui have such a good relationship? It's not difficult. After a moment of silence, Ling Mo said solemnly, You are willing to destroy the bloody world. You come with good intentions and do us a great favor. From today on, you are the second honorary protector of the Linli building. Your status is equal to ours. You can stay or leave at will. What do you think? Su Qingtan pondered for a moment and looked up. I have no objection. Su Qinghao smiled happily. I listen to you. Yunyi scratched his head and said, You can make the decision. Fang Yuan nodded and looked back to Su Li. He asked, Are you satisfied? The atmosphere suddenly became faintly tense. Ho ho, Su Li chuckled and took off the black veil, revealing a delicate and pretty face. Then she stood up and bowed slightly. Colleagues, Qing Shui is here to greet you. Seeing Su Li's face, Fang Yuan and others were surprised and doubtful. She was too young. She was definitely younger than Bu Wang, but her cultivation was stronger than his. It was extremely unreasonable. As for what fellow practitioner Fang wants to ask. Su Li turned over her hand, and the opposing blood bead appeared in her palm, faintly revealing bloody luster. Su Buwang subconsciously clutched his chest, and his eyes were a little confused. This thing. When Fang Yuan and Ling Mo saw this thing, they were all shocked. It was the bloody light embedded in Su Buwang's chest. Because of this thing, you were defeated. Although Su Li didn't say it clearly, taking out this thing was obviously a tacit agreement. In order not to forget my brother, I took this thing and did some investigation. This thing is called the opposing blood bead. Do you have any impression of it? Fang Yuan's eyes flashed with bitterness. After a few moments of silence, he barely kept calm. After thinking for a moment, he said, There are fragmentary records in the classics of the sect. This is an ancient treasure, but, yes. Su Li smiled and looked at Fang Yuan. Fellow practitioner Fang is really from a famous sect. You can even recognize such a treasure from a long time ago. The opposing blood bead was an evil treasure in ancient times. It has been destroyed for a long time. This thing is just a replica. Others were confused. Even Ling Mo had never heard of the opposing blood bead. He could only listen on the side and couldn't get a word in. Fang Yuan shook his head slightly and said seriously, Compared with fellow practitioner Qing Shui, I am far inferior. No one can find out the name of this thing in a short time except fellow practitioner Qing Shui. Su Li chuckled, I'm just lucky. Since it is an evil treasure. Su Buwang couldn't help but interrupt, why is it here? From childhood to adulthood, I have never taken anything from Shengtian Shrine except for this. As he said, he rolled up his sleeves, and a pattern appeared. This is Yong Jade Mask. Ling Mo's pupils shrank, and his figure flashed in front of Su Buwang in an instant. He looked a little excited. Su Buwang looked at Ling Mo with some astonishment. In his impression, this elder always had a cold face, and his temperament was even colder than Uncle Fang. Why was he so excited when he saw the mask? This was given to me by the mammy who took care of me since I was a child. Later, she died, and I kept it as a souvenir. Su Buwang explained, but Ling Mo couldn't help but laugh happily after hearing it. I knew it. You in the reincarnation mirror is the real you. Were what you did in the past a smokescreen? What Mammy's relic was just a cover deliberately set by Ling Li. You killed your own son, deceived everyone, and even let Su Buwang hate you. Who are you acting for? What are you afraid of? Ling Li. Ling Mo had a lot of thoughts. Su Buwang carefully rolled up his sleeves. He really didn't understand. Although there was a general memory in the bloodstone, many details were missing, and the yin-yang jade mask was not mentioned. So he couldn't understand what yang jade mask meant. The appearance of the yang jade mask and Su Buwang's words. Such a huge flaw made everyone fall into silence. So, was he the person who set up the Linli building? Su Li held her chin and looked at the silent crowd. She was thoughtful, but her eyes were extremely cold. In any case, the sufferings of Wanger in these years should be counted on him. She not only wanted to investigate the secret of Shengtian Shrine, but also those culprits in the past. None of them could escape. You're tuning in to the Dreamy Chapters YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.